Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of viewers aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. It really helps keep these long stories coming. Also, for even more police horror stories, check out my new channel. The link's in the description and pinned comment. I'd love it if you stop by and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. What time is it where you are and which city are you listening from tonight? Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. I eased the cruiser onto the gravel shoulder of County Road 142, my headlights carving a narrow path through the thick Texas darkness. The dashboard clock glowed 1:17 a.m. My boots crunched against loose stones as I stepped out, every nerve ragged from hours of dead air and faint radio static. 30 minutes earlier, dispatch flagged a hang-up call with no coordinates, just silence sliced by breathy hiss. I'd traced it here, where the highway narrows and the mesquite trees press close. The air hung heavy, almost viscous, smelling of dust and hot metal. I flicked my flashlight on, the beam oscillating as I squared my shoulders against the night. The road stretched emptily in both directions. To the north, a lone neon sign bled half its light over the shuttered windows of Mel's Diner. To the south, the outline of a rusted water tower rose like a sentinel. I relayed my position. Unit Summit, on scene at suspected hang-up. But only static answered. My heartbeat drummed in my ears as I approached the diner's parking lot, noting the uneven rows of broken glass that crunched underfoot. The open bulb in the sign sputtered half-heartedly, blinking in uneven intervals, its crimson glow casting twisted reflections across the cracked asphalt. I skirted the diner's front window, pressing my palm to the cool metal frame. Inside, the tables were draped in stale dust, and the coffee machine stood idle, its warming plate cold. I lifted my gaze to the counter. Tarnished chrome stools lined up like sentinels, each one empty, each bearing the imprint of countless patrons long gone. A single blood-stained napkin lay unfolded on the formica, its edges curled and stained dark. I knelt and slipped on a glove, brushing the tip of my finger over the smear. Sticky, tacky, no drips, just that single scarf of red. I sealed it in an evidence bag and stood, jaw clenched. A sudden groan of metal made me whip around. The diner's back door creaked against its loose hinge, swinging wide in a ghostly invitation. I raised my flashlight, voice tight. "Police! Anyone in there? Show yourself." My words echoed under the low-hanging ceiling tiles before dying in a hollow silence. I crossed the threshold, step by cautious step, boots muted against the worn linoleum. The stench of mothballs and stale grease pressed in. My light swung over rows of empty booths. No footprint, no sign of movement. Just the hush of the building settling after hours. My radio crackled faintly. Someone keyed up, then nothing. I squared my shoulders, reminding myself that backup was en route, maybe 10 minutes out if I held on. I moved toward the alley, gut tightening as the stale air gave way to the cold wind. Every instinct screamed caution. The dumpster lids rattled in the breeze, and the beam of my light landed on a shadow that didn't belong. A shape crouched behind a dumpster, too still to be wind-blown trash. I dropped low and called again, louder. "Come out with your hands visible." Gravel shifted under my foot. The shape didn't move. I edged forward, hand hovering near the holster. My fingers brushed the polymer grip, a familiar weight that always calmed me, sort of. I clicked my flashlight higher, spotlighting smeared footprints leading away from the diner, toward the south, toward the empty stretch of road. No time to waste. I followed, heart pounding. The footprint stopped abruptly where the road cut through a shallow wash. The gravel heaped into a ridge, flanked on both sides by thin strands of broken glass. I picked my way over it, chest tight. The wind gusted, bending mesquite fronds and sending a faint rustling across the wash. A lone headlight glimmered half a mile down, then winked out. I cursed softly and radioed dispatch. Possible suspicious person on foot. No visual on suspect. Continuing pursuit westbound. My breath came faster. I raced until the ground leveled, stopping at the edge of a deserted convenience store's parking area. The quick-stop sign overflowed with dead bulbs. Its windows were caged with rusty bars. A strobe alarm light flickered inside, bright enough to spark sweat on my forehead. I drifted closer, flattening my palm against the glass. Yellow, fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead, but inside, the cables dangled loose, dead. I pressed my face to the glass, searching for movement, but found only the dusty rows of mismatched merchandise, a tide of empty shelves. A dull thud behind me jolted me around. My flashlight caught the gleam of a rope coiled near the rear wheel of an abandoned pickup. Thick, frayed, and soaked in something dark. Fear twisted my gut. I threatened into my radio. Evidence. Rope. Looks bloodied. Stop civilian traffic in area. I bagged the rope and rose, scanning the shadows. The convenience store's door hung ajar, a crack. I stepped forward, hand on holster, every muscle screaming. Inside, the floor was slick. Oil or something more sinister. My boots nearly slipped as I followed a set of footprints that disappeared at the manager's office door, left slightly ajar. I clicked on my secondary light. The beam dancing over a safe swung open, its contents rifled. No cash, no valuables, just a lone post-it stuck to the inside of the door. Johnson Co. couldn't find what you hid here. My breath froze. My fingers trembled as I peeled it off and tucked it into an evidence bag. A taunt, a challenge. My radio erupted, backup finally answering my call, but then burst into static. I slammed my fist on the counter, voice low and ragged. I need a frequency check. I'm losing comms. No response except the staccato buzz of the alarm. I spun, every shadow suddenly alive. I bolted back outside, stomach twisting, every instinct screaming that someone had been, or still was, watching me. I fumbled for my keys at the cruiser, siren blaring as I hit the button, only to have the lights flash weakly before dying. The engine sputtered, then roared to life just enough to keep me breathing. My reflection shimmered in the rearview mirror, eyes wide, face tight with exhaustion and adrenaline. I raked a hand through my hair and punched the mic. Dispatch, I'm on Route 10 heading east to the feed store. Backup, meet me at mile marker 83. The feed store was as desolate as everything else here. Wide open lot, silent pens behind a chain-link fence, no one to be seen. I stepped into the tall grass by the fence line. My flashlight skittered over old feed bags and scattered animal droppings. The wind moaned through the fence wires, a hollow dirge. A single set of boot prints led past the pens to a locked side gate. I knelt by the prints, tracing each indentation. Deer? No, human. Size 10, maybe 10.5. My radio crackled weakly. Unit Summit, acknowledge? I snapped the mic closer. Copy, I'm proceeding on foot. My boots sank into soft dirt as I pushed the gate open. No creak, no snap. Just a thin gust that carried the tang of old hay. I slipped inside, heart hammering, breath shallow. The stalls were empty, shadows pooling like ink under broken beams. My light landed on half a hay bale, stained dark at one corner. I froze, pulse spiking. I called for backup again, voice unsteady. Backup? ETA? Static. I swallowed hard, edged closer to the bale, my light trembling. There, nestled in torn hay, I saw a smear of linen cloth knotted tightly. I reached out, glove first, pulling it free. Inside, a crumpled photograph. A small-town sheriff's badge, half buried in blood. My stomach lurched. Hands shaking, I tucked the photo into an evidence bag, sealing it with a snap. The wind kicked up behind me, stirring the hay into frantic whispers. I spun, flashlight slicing the darkness. Nothing but empty stalls and pounding silence. I cursed under my breath. My fingers hovered over the radio, backup still nowhere. I stepped back through the gate, heart thunderous, every hair on my neck alert. The deserted lot stretched out under the pale glow of a single street lamp, one lone bulb that buzzed and flickered like it wanted to die. I climbed into the cruiser, slamming the door, engine roaring. My hands flew over the console, activating the lights again, hoping for any sign of the other units. Ahead, the road forked toward a silent suburb. White fences, dark windows. My gut twisted. No alcohol call, no petty theft, just this. A ruined diner, a stolen truck, a blood-soaked rope, a taunting note, a murdered fear trapped in a photograph. Night had swallowed every clue, but I was alive. I was scars and bruises and cold coffee and a lifetime of routine. And here I was, standing at the edge of something I couldn't name, clutching pieces of a broken puzzle that made no sense. I shifted gear and eased out of the lot, headlights sweeping over empty driveways. Each shadow stretched long, eager to hide the next piece, waiting in the dark. My chest tightened. The radio lay silent, the road yawning ahead. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes, cold, calculating, watched from just beyond my beam. And as I drove into the night, every mile felt heavier, every breath more urgent, carrying me deeper into a darkness I might never escape. I eased off the accelerator and let the cruiser glide down the vacant stretch of asphalt that led into Westwood Heights, a sleepy subdivision on Odessa's fringe. The edge of town looked like a row of unlit black windows at first, ranch-style houses aligned like tombstones. Each driveway held a car or two, none moving. My light swept over manicured lawns. Sprinkler heads poked through frost-cooled grass, silent. I flicked on the overhead dome lamp briefly, just enough to flip through the CAD notes on my tablet. No active calls here, nothing to explain why I'd followed those bloody footprints out of the feed store and into someone's front yard. My radio crackled to life. "Summit, this is Unit Delta. We're 9 minutes out at Quick Stop." I acknowledged, then muted the mic. Knowing backup was en route eased the knot in my gut, but only marginally. Every instinct screamed that I was alone out here, chasing shadows across empty lots. I switched off the dome light and rolled the window down a crack. Cold night air gusted in, carrying the sour odor of fertilizer and something metallic. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. I followed a faint skid mark into a cul-de-sac. At its center, a wrought iron mailbox leaned crooked, scraped against a concrete pad. The skid pointed uphill toward a darkened 2-story house at the end of the circle. Its porch light was shattered. Jagged glass lay in twisted shards. I killed the engine and stepped out, flashlight and radio in hand. Each footstep felt deafening. The beam landed on the front door, which hung ajar, not cracked, but swung wide, as if someone had barged through without hesitation. "Odessa PD, show your hands," I called into the yawning threshold. My voice echoed against the stucco walls, then died. The air beyond the door smelled of wet carpet and something acrid. I edged forward, holstering the radio mic, and letting my grip rest on the holster release. Inside, the living room looked ransacked. couch cushions torn open, stuffing spilling onto a threadbare rug, framed photos knocked from the mantel, lying shattered. I swept the light across a coffee table strewn with papers until it paused on a single, blood-spattered sheet of notebook paper pinned under a lamp base. I picked up the page gingerly, ink smudged into red streaks. Scrawled words read, "Still watching. You can't save them all." My breath caught. Save them? I glanced around. No bodies, no signs of struggle beyond the vandalism. Whoever had been here wanted me to see that note, to send a message. My radio buzzed again. Summit, we're on approach. ETA 2 minutes. I taped the note into an evidence bag and slipped it into my pocket, then scanned the room. The hallway beyond led deeper into the darkened house. If someone was hiding, that's where they'd be. I keyed my mic, voice low. Backup, hold at cul-de-sac. Possible suspect inside 3207 Copperwood Drive. Gritting my teeth, I advanced. The hall carpet was stained with muddy footprints. I followed them past closed doors. Bathroom, guest bedroom, each one untouched. At the end stood the master bedroom door, its paint marred by fresh scuff marks. I motioned my light inside. The room was bathed in pale moonlight through torn curtains. A large bed dominated the center, its sheets in disarray. On the floor, near the dresser, lay a man's leather wallet, empty. I flicked through its contents. Driver's license for a Travis Cardenas, local real estate agent. No cash, no cards, just an open pocket where something had been yanked away. I pocketed the wallet and heard it then, faint tapping, as if fingernails rapping on wood. My flashlight beam traced the dresser drawers, one slightly open. I slammed it shut and the tapping stopped. Adrenaline spiked. I stepped back, hand on holster. A slow creak sounded behind me, the closet door inching open. I called again, voice taut. "Odessa PD, step out with your hands on your head." No response. The door finished sliding, revealing empty shelves and a set of hanging coats. Then the beam caught movement behind the coats, one swinging ever so slightly. I drew down the coats, flashing underneath. Nothing but a pair of scuffed work boots, oddly placed. I knelt, inspecting the laces, tied in a rough knot and soaked in something dark. I sealed the boots in an evidence bag. A low groan came from above, like someone banging on the floor above the ceiling. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might burst. I tapped my shoulder mic. "Miners, check roof." A new voice crackled back. "Copy that, Summit." I raced down the hall, trying doors as I went. Each one locked. The front door, too, locked from the inside. Whoever was in here had sealed themselves deliberately. I reached the kitchen and found a back entrance. A sliding glass door with its latch broken. Outside, a narrow patio framed by overgrown hedges. I slipped through, flashlight trained on the hedgerows. Every twitch of leaf and stray branch looked like some lurking figure. I circled the side yard, boots sinking into damp earth. The back fence had a gap, enough for someone to squeeze through. Footprints led past a row of trash cans to the neighbor's driveway. I jogged across the cul-de-sac toward house number 3208. No porch light, but inside a single TV flickered blue through the blinds. I crept to the window, hand on my holster. My light caught a silhouette standing in the living room. Tall, the shape of a man. He turned, and for the first time I saw his face, half hidden under a hood, eyes glinting in the gloom. He raised a hand and pointed at me. No words, just that gesture. Then he lunged sideways and vanished into a back hallway. I rammed the front door. It opened on my second shove. Inside, the man had left a trail of muddy footprints on the tile. I followed them into the hallway, past framed photos of children's soccer teams, until I reached the back stairs leading up to a loft. My light bobbed as I climbed, each creak of the steps setting my nerves on edge. At the top, the loft opened to a small office. Papers plastered the walls, maps of Odessa neighborhoods, red pins at certain addresses. Mel's Diner, Quick Stop, the feed store, my own precinct. Lines scrawled between each pin, connecting them in a web too deliberate to be random. My pulse hammered as I read one corner. He's closer than he knows. A sudden thud behind me jolted me around. My flashlight slashed across the room, empty. The door behind me slammed shut. My glove caught on the handle as I lunged for the doorknob. It wouldn't turn. I yanked at it, heart racing. Light frantically sweeping the room. Shadows flickered across the maps, as if someone crossed in front of the bulb. I slammed my shoulder into the door, letting out a guttural roar. The wood splintered at the frame but held. I glanced around. A ledger lay open on a desk, detailing names and dates. Victims, times, locations. One entry read, November 12th, 2009, Officer P. Summers, unsolved. My breath caught as I stared at the name, my own badge number hidden in plain sight. The stench of something foul drifted up from the vents. My teeth ground as I dug into my pocket for handcuffs, preparing to break the door if I had to. My radio was silent again, dead. Backup must be stalled. Nothing I could do about it now. My knuckles whitened around the cuffs. Then, a raspy whisper beyond the door. I see you. The voice sounded distant yet intimate, as if from inside my own mind. I froze, breath lodged in my throat. The whisper came again, closer. This ends tonight. My grip tightened on the handcuffs, every muscle coiled. Heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat, I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then the whisper, right behind me. So close I swear I felt breath on my neck. Too late. I spun, flashlight beam carving the loft into fragments of light and dark. Empty. Nothing. The door handle rattled. I braced my shoulder again, but the whisper came a third time. Soft and final. I'm already inside. My mind raced. Fear clawed at me. I lunged for the nearest window, tearing at the frame. Glass splintered under my fingers and I kicked out the pain in one violent motion. Cold night air rushed in. Below lay the patio, hedges, and the whispering wind. No officer lights, no backup, just the void beyond. I dropped out onto the porch, shards scattering as I landed, skin stinging. The whisper lingered on the breeze. You can't save them all. My chest burned, and my breath came in ragged gasps. I straightened, turning the beam of my flashlight across the neighborhood. Every house dark, every window sealed. Somewhere out there, he watched. I could feel it in the hush of the cul-de-sac, in the empty roads that led nowhere. My hands shook on the light and radio. The wires felt dead, the world abandoned. I was alone again, caught in a web I'd barely begun to untangle. And as I stared into the ink-black night, I knew that every step forward would only dig me deeper into his game. The night pressed in on me like a vice as I crouched beside my cruiser, every muscle taut. My breath spiraled out in white puffs beneath the stuttering street lamp. The photograph in my pocket burned cold against my thigh, my badge number, my name, etched in blood on that hay-stained ledger. Nothing felt real anymore. My radio lay useless, backup still on its way, and the sprawling map of Odessa etched on that loft wall taunted me. Pins connected by red lines tracing my every step tonight. I unholstered my firearm and racked the slide once, checking the chamber. My fingers trembled, but my eyes were steely. Somewhere out there he was watching, smiling at how fragile I'd become. I stood and clicked my heels together, forcing my limbs to move, even as the neighborhood around me seemed frozen in a tableau of suburban decay. Each house window stared back like a blank eye. I thought of the feed store, the diner, the convenience shop. 4 scenes, 4 taunts, and now this cul-de-sac graveyard. Each clue more personal than the last. That phrase, "You can't save them all," echoed in my mind. The same line scrawled on diner napkins, whispered through vents, and now dripping from the pen of this madman. My chest tightened. I had to push forward, even though every instinct begged me to bolt for the station, to call it off, to write tonight off as one deranged hunter's game. But I couldn't. Too many unanswered questions. What linked these locations? Why was I the target? Whoever he was, he'd studied me, watched my patterns, knew I'd chase a hang-up call to a lonely diner at 1:17 a.m., knew I'd follow bloody footprints into a silent suburban street. He'd baited me here into his web. I leaned against the cruiser, swung the door open, and retrieved my tablet. The battery was dead, no surprise. I cursed under my breath, slamming the screen closed. In my other hand, I gripped the bloody photograph. I thumbed it, staring at the numbers that weren't numbers anymore. They were a brand, a threat. A distant engine roar split the stillness. Back up. I flicked on my headlights, the beams gouging bright slashes through the black. 2 cruisers rolled over the crest, lights off until they were nearly on top of me. I waved them down. Delta, Echo, inside 3207 Copperwood. Active suspect, multiple scenes. He's playing me, I warned, voice hollow. They parked, doors opening to reveal uniformed faces lined with fatigue. I handed one officer the note. "Johnson County. You can't save them all." His eyes flickered with shock. The other radioed for an ambulance, though no one was visibly hurt. Together, we approached the crooked mailbox. I pointed up at the shattered porch light. He's probably holed up inside watching us. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One gripped his weapon as I did mine. Our boots crunched in unison as we closed in on the front door. I paused, listening. Nothing but the soft hum of distant highway traffic. No scuffle, no taunt, just the oppressive silence. Then a sudden crash inside, the sound of drywall giving way, wood splintering, and a low, inhuman scream twisting into laughter. My gut knotted as we surged through the threshold together. Inside, the living room was a riot of chaos, more extreme than before. Pictures thrown aside, furniture overturned. A trail of sticky footprints curved across the floor, shining under our flashlights. We followed it into the kitchen, where the back door lay splintered, swinging open onto the patio. Beyond, the hedges whispered in the moonlight. My radio crackled to life. Call signs flashing green, but I silenced it. We had to move. One officer shouted, "He's out back," and we all barreled through the broken door. The yard was a claustrophobic tunnel of overgrown hedgerows. My light caught movement. Something crouched by the fence, then vanished. I advanced slowly, each breath measured, sidearm at the ready. The grass was damp, water pooling in footprints leading toward the neighbor's yard. We pressed forward into the darkness. Branches slapped my face, and the stench of fertilizer mixed with something coppery. I had no radio, no backup on call, just 3 officers against the void. Suddenly, a figure darted across a patch of moonlit concrete, a tall silhouette with a hood bounding toward the street. I yanked the trigger twice. The snaps deafened in the quiet. He stumbled, then recovered, turning to look back. Weak moonlight revealed pale skin, sunken eyes, eyes that held contempt. He raised a hand in a slow wave before melting into the shadows beyond our reach. I scrambled toward where he vanished, heart pounding, only to find empty air. My partner radioed, voice trembling, "He's gone." "And there's another note, officer." She held up a crumpled sheet soaked in red, pinned to the fence with 3 rusted nails. I pried it free. This is only the beginning. My blood ran cold. The words weren't scrawled in haste. They were deliberate, surgical. Someone had all night to write this, to pin it, to lure us here. I sank to one knee, flashlight beam shaking across the yard. The wind picked up, stirring the note in my hand like a warning. My uniform felt suffocating, weighed down by every scene we'd left behind. I glanced back at the house. Once a haven, now just another crime scene in his twisted itinerary. My radio sputtered again, static and then dispatch. "All units clear the area, stand down." I stared at the speaker, incredulous. Stand down? After everything tonight? I stashed the note, holstered my pistol, and stood, shoulders heavy. The sky was paling east, a bruised purple bleeding into dawn. We filed back toward our cruisers, the street empty and expectant. Each house stood silent, holding its breath. I slid into the driver's seat, engine idling, the photograph still warm in my pocket. Around me, my team sat in their cars, faces drawn in the blue glow of dashboard lights. We'd collected evidence, chased shadows, exchanged gunfire, and yet he remained at large, his final line echoing in my mind. This is only the beginning. I exhaled slowly, chest tight. The world looked innocent in the pale light, houses, mailboxes, lawns dew-damp and ordinary. But I knew the truth, that beneath this mundane veneer lurked someone who knew my every move, someone who'd outsmarted me at every turn. And as we rolled away, leaving behind another massacre of normalcy, I realized that tonight I had been the prey, and whatever game he was playing, it was far from over. I parked the cruiser at the rear of the precinct just as the first sliver of sunrise tinted the horizon, a faint wash of lavender. I sat for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel, heartbeat settling, but not by much. The photograph lay on the passenger seat beside me, half concealed under the evidence bag containing the post-it note. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, tasting the acrid tang of cold coffee in the cup holder. That damned phrase, "This is only the beginning," echoed in my skull. Inside, the station was stirring to life. Officers milling at roll call, the hum of radios and printers. No one could grasp the full scope of last night's runaround. A hang-up that led me to Mel's diner. A stolen truck with a bloodied rope. A convenience store alarm. A feed store with a blood-soaked sheriff's photo. Then 2 houses riddled with personal messages. Now, here I was, slogging into paperwork and interviews. I grabbed the bag with the photograph and note, shouldered my kit, and stepped into the fluorescent glare of the hallway. Sergeant Lawson spotted me first. Her mouth set in a tight line when she saw my uniform caked with dirt and the dark stains on my boots. "You look like hell," she said grimly. I offered a curt nod and showed her the evidence bag. "It's escalated. He's personal, he knows me." She frowned, leading me down to the conference room where Delta and Echo waited, rubbing at bags under their eyes. Lawson dropped the bag on the table, flipping it open. The photograph showed my own badge number over hay-stained paper, the post-it curled and blood-mottled. "He's tying scenes together," I said. "Stalking me since midnight. We think he's planning more. We caught 2 notes, but he's been here." I gestured at the table, cluttered with maps, receipts, photos. "And he's still out there." Delta leaned in, scanning the ledger pages taped to the wall. A web of red markers overlays Odessa's map, linking Mel's diner, Quick Stop, the feed store, Copperwood Drive, and now here. Pattern emerges. He chooses places where you responded alone, Echo observed. He wants you isolated. Sergeant Lawson paced. We pull every unit off calls. We go high profile on this, media release, task force. We shut down one scene at a time, bring in all personnel. Her voice rose until she realized half the precinct was staring. She took a breath. All right, Summit, you're off patrol. You coordinate from here, but no more solo runs. You understand? I nodded, feeling relief and frustration entwine. Understood. For the next 2 hours, we sifted through evidence. The rope fibers matched those used in agricultural fencing. All I knew was that it couldn't have been purchased locally. Orders like that came through a northern supplier. The napkin's blood type was inconclusive, but DNA traces on the photograph revealed nothing. No match in CODIS. The post-it note had been torn from a standard office pad sold at local big box. Nothing forensic remained except that cold, personal whisper of the killer's sentence. By mid-morning, I'd given statements, signed off on forms, then retreated to my office. I set the photograph and note on my desk, blinking under the overhead light. I powered up my own laptop and loaded a mapping program, overlaying each location. On my screen, Westwood Heights, Mel's Diner, the feed store, Quick Stop, Copperwood Drive, and now the precinct, plotted like a circle of traps. They were all within an 8 miles radius, each equidistant from the next. A perfect ring. I traced the circle with my fingertip. Then I nudged each pin toward the center. Old Blackwell Road, a stretch of abandoned railway and rusted boxcars outside town. No calls had come from there, no crime scene. And yet it sat smack in the center of his circle. A dread settled in my gut. I sat back and stared at the screen, thinking of the circle closing in, thinking of those boxcars, thinking that something unimaginable waited at the heart. My phone vibrated. A text from dispatch. Report of suspicious van parked at mile marker 45 on Interstate 10. No plates, driver unresponsive. Unit Theta en route. I felt a chill. 45 on I-10 bordered that old rail spur, right along that dead center path. I tapped back, acknowledge. I'll mobilize UAV scout from the hangar. I collected my gear again, ballistic vest, helmet, radio, sidearm, and headed for the garage. The morning sun glared off patrol cars as I climbed into the remote control seat of the department's drone console. A bored junior officer guided me through the launch sequence as I maneuvered the drone north over the sprawl of Odessa, tilting the camera to track the empty freeway. Within minutes, I located the van. A white box van with tinted windows, doors shut, engine off, no plates. It sat half on the shoulder, half on the lane line, tires flat. I zoomed in, the driver's seatbelt lay loose, as if tossed aside, and the side door bore the outline of dried blood. My skin prickled. The van was silent, but I sensed eyes behind those tinted windows. I marked the coordinates and radioed ground units. All units proceed to Interstate 10-mile marker 45. Possible hazard, unknown occupant. Provide perimeter. The boys in the field acknowledged, sirens roaring as they fanned out along the interstate. I hovered the drone, sweat beating at my temples despite the AC blasting. The highway shimmered in the midday heat. Nothing to see except that white box already cordoned off. I made a mental note. The center of his circle had awakened. Later that afternoon, I joined the perimeter at the scene, standing behind caution tape as Theta confirmed the van's doors were locked from the inside. An armored robot would breach, but until then, we held. I watched the sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Across from me, the boxcars rusted in the rail yard, their metal plates pockmarked and silent. I knew those cars. They were the graves of forgotten crimes, drugs, human trafficking, bodies dumped. But we never had the resources to raid them, not until now. I keyed my mic. Theta, breach when ready. All units stand by. Silence crackled. Then a jarring clank as the robot's arm smashed through the passenger window. A cloud of glass rattled down, and the robot's camera slid inside to scan the seats. A single man slumped over the wheel. No movement. He wore a hooded sweatshirt, face hidden. The scanner's thermal sensor showed a faint heat signature, still warm. I swallowed hard as they pried the door. Inside, the van's interior was awash with stale air and a metallic smell. The robot retreated, and Delta darted in, approaching the figure with weapon drawn. I watched through my drone feed, my pulse hammered. They unzipped the hood. The man's features were gaunt, hollowed eyes staring blankly. A bruise bloomed across his temple, dried blood crusting at his hairline. They called it. One down, he's alive but unconscious. He was cuffed and hauled out on a stretcher, and as he lifted the hood, I recognized the face flickering on my drone screen from the maps in that loft. The man at the feed store. The quick stop, Copperwood Drive. His eyes opened as they wheeled him past me, glazed and distant. I met his gaze. For a moment, I thought I saw a smirk, hard to be sure. Then, medics whisked him off, and the van's doors were pried wide. Inside, the air was thick with rancid odor. Footprints led to the back, where crates had been stacked against the wall. Underneath the crates, the boxcars. Boxes waiting to be opened. That night, I returned to my home on the east side of Odessa. The house was quiet, my wife and kids away for the weekend. I closed the front door softly, hung my vest by the rack, and dropped my gear in the living room. I moved to the kitchen, flicked on a lamp, and made instant coffee. My hands shook as I stirred. The photograph and note sat on the counter. I stared down at them, blood and ink on paper, promises woven in threats. My phone rang. It was Lawson. "Summit, listen up. The suspect's ID just came through. Name's Garrett Zane. Local handyman, no criminal record. Lives at 12 Blackwell Road." My blood ran cold. Blackwell Road, the center point. A dozen houses dot that stretch, but only one was his. A rundown cottage across from the rail spur. It had a sagging porch, broken windows, and a chain-link fence sagging open. I finished my coffee in 2 gulps, left the lights on, and drove out there. Jet black sky overhead, the road silent. My headlights fell on the cottage, Zane's place, where the circle began and where it would end. I parked, radioed the tactical unit, then walked up the cracked driveway, flashlight slicing the gloom. Every step echoed. My heart throbbed. I reached the porch and peered inside. Furniture overturned, photographs torn from walls. On the floor lay an open leather journal, pages stained red, scrawled with dates and times, the entire itinerary of his game. He'd planned each scene, each message, each scare. He hunted me across Odessa's outskirts like a predator tracing a scent. A faint creak behind me made me spin. Zane stood at the top of the stairs, face illuminated by my beam, eyes blazing. In his hand, he held a notebook, fresh pages, blood dripping from the tip of a pen. He smiled. "You're finally here," he said, voice soft but deadly. I cleared my throat, pistololo drawn, voice tight as barbed wire. "Garrett Zane, Odessa PD, drop it." The porch boards creaked under his weight as he put one booted foot onto the bottom step. Pen balanced between his index and middle fingers like a grotesque conductor's baton. His eyes glinted with something feral, hungry. Moonlight sifted through the broken window panes, casting sickly patterns across his face. hollows beneath his cheekbones, shadows draped like funeral shrouds beneath his brow. He tilted his head, a slow, lazy gesture that made my skin crawl. "Detective Summers, I've been expecting you." His voice slipped into the folds of the night, smooth as oil, yet razor-sharp at the edges. My finger found the trigger guard, not yet on the trigger, but ready. Every muscle in my body rebelled against the burn of adrenaline hot in my veins. I swallowed, keeping my voice level. Why me? Why all of this? The pen in his hand dripped a single bead of dark liquid. Blood, I realized, from some cut or wound. He lifted a hand and flicked it to demonstrate, droplets scattering onto the porch wood in sparse, careless arcs. "Because you believe in order, in protocol," he said. His tone was almost affectionate, as if addressing a prized adversary in a chess match. "And this," he swept his free hand toward the darkness behind me, "was chaos painted in your own fear." He took another step, pinning me under that gaze. "But you see, it wasn't random. It was meticulously crafted, and you followed every step." I kept my breathing steady, shoulders squared. My radio was silent, back up en route, but not here yet. My world had shrunk to the distance between us. "Where are the others?" "The people you wrote about?" "The threats." I gestured at the ledger pages taped to the porch wall and the maps spread across the desk inside. He glanced over at the journal flickering under the lamp in the parlor window, his journal of scenes. He smiled softly. "They're alive. Every note, every scene was a warning. Each location marked a failure of your watch: the diner, the rope, the convenience store, the feed store, Copperwood Drive, the gas station outside town. Everywhere you went, I left you a message. You can't save everyone." He paused, letting the words settle like stones dropped in water. "But you saved yourself, Detective." I met his stare, matching the steel in his eyes with my own resolve. "End it now, Zane, before anyone else gets hurt." The pen in his hand rattled against the banister as he shifted his weight. His lips curved into a slow grin that made my gut twist. "Hurt?" He laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that skated across the walls of the house behind him. "This was never about hurting them. It was about revealing you, your limits, your fears, your humanity." I flinched, memories colliding in my mind. The flavor of stale coffee at Mel's Diner, the clang of garbage can lids behind Quick Stop, the press of my flashlight against that blood-stained lunch napkin, the metallic stink in the feed store among empty hay bales, the frantic tapping from the vents at Copperwood Drive. Each scene tightened like a noose around my chest. He took another step forward, pen raised, shadow lengthening, behind him until he filled the world. "You see the map on my wall?" he said, voice dropping. "Each pin marked another of your regrets: the call you missed in Johnson County, the cold case that stole your sleep, the times you arrived too late. I gathered them all, replayed them, and invited you to relive them." He tapped the pen against his palm. "Tonight was your reckoning." I swallowed hard, jaw working. I'd rather die than let you off. I edged sideways, trying to widen the gap, heart galloping in my throat. "Turn yourself in." His grin sharpened. "Turn myself in." He laughed again, tossing the pen up and catching it. "My dear detective, it is far too late for that. You see, the final act plays out tonight." He spun on his heel and strode inside the house, pen flying from his hand to land shattered on the porch. I pursued him, boots thudding, weapon raised. Inside, the parlor lamp cast long, sickly shadows across the floor. Furniture lay overturned. On the wall opposite the door, the collage of memories trembled in the light. The postcards from the diner, the receipts from the convenience store, The photograph from the feed store, all pinned beneath the sprawling web of red yarn on a corkboard. In the center, a hastily scrawled note read, "The center point awaits." He paused at the journal, pages fanned open at the entry for Blackwell Road, the orphaned railway boxcars. He turned, eyes gleaming. "That's where we started." He picked up the journal, petting the pages as though stroking a cherished pet. "And that's where it ends." I felt the weight of every sleepless night, every cold call, every question unasked. My legs trembled as I realized the trap closing around me. "What's there?" I whispered, voice tight as a bowstring. He closed the journal with a snap and stuffed it in his jacket. "Your final scene. Your epilogue." He moved past me, heading toward the back door. I followed, hand poised on the trigger, every nerve shivering. Outside, the temperature had dropped, vapor curled from our breaths. The porch was silent, save for the distant hum of the highway. He led me down the driveway under the sickly glow of a single porch light, then into the yard where my cruiser's headlights had long since faded. Beyond that, in the deep black of the night, the rail spur lay hidden among weeds and rusted ties. He paused at the edge of the lawn. "Detective Summers," he said softly, reaching into his pocket to produce a car key. "Open the cruiser." He nodded toward my patrol car, its engine cold and dark some 50 yards away. I hesitated, finger tightening on the pistol. "Come on," he coaxed. "Go on, you taught me the protocol. Always secure your vehicle. Always check your blind spots." He smiled, turning the key in his hand as if it were a trophy. My instincts screamed not to follow, but I obeyed, stepping toward the cruiser with bulletproof calm. I reached the driver's door and pulled, locked. I slotted the key into the lock cylinder and turned. The door clicked open. I peered inside. Darkness, empty seat, the radio still dead. I closed the door and faced him. "This is wrong," I said, voice unsteady. He tilted his head, expression inscrutable. "Everything about tonight is right." He produced a second key, my backup key from my patrol vest, and tossed it at me. "You'll need this next." Then he threw the car key at my feet and turned, strode into the embankment that led to the tracks. My heart pounded. I clenched the backup key in one hand, pistol in the other. "Stop this!" I yelled. "Turn yourself over." He paused a dozen feet from the fence. "You'll never escape," he said. His voice was distant, a whisper carried by the wind. "Follow me if you dare." Then he slipped through the opening in the chain link and melted into the shadow of the boxcars. I stood on the grass, listening as the wind rattled the fence, echoing through the abandoned cars like a distant train whistle. My mind raced. I could call it in. Backup was on the way, but each second drawn out felt like a nail driven deeper into my conscience. He'd taught me the lesson of the night. No protocol could save the ones you care about. Tonight, I was the one he cared about torturing. I holstered my pistol, key in hand, and approached the fence. My boots sank in soft earth. I slid through the gap, pressed against the side of the nearest boxcar, and peered into the darkness of its interior. The beam of my flashlight caught swirls of dust motes dancing in the stale air. I took a steadying breath and stepped inside. Rust flakes underfoot. The air smelled of decay and old oil. A slender corridor ran between rows of stacked pallets. At the far end, a pale figure slumped against the wall, Zane's silhouette. I squinted, heart hammering. He sat cross-legged, eyes closed, pen and journal open in his lap. I flicked my light higher. His face looked younger here, almost boyish, haunted. I kept my voice low. "It ends now. Give yourself up." My words seemed clumsy in the hush. He opened his eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. He looked at me with a curious calm. "I did," he said softly. "I gave myself up to the truth." He tapped the journal. "My confession is complete." He closed it, tucking it under his arm. I hesitated, unsure what to do next. Sirens wailed distantly. Zane rose smoothly, stepping toward me. I raised my flashlight and pistol in tandem. He smiled, a sad, gentle expression that shattered my resolve. "Detective, you saved yourself tonight," he said, voice trembling with genuine warmth. "But the story never ends." He took a step closer, and the train cars seemed to close in. My finger trembled on the trigger. Then, just before I could squeeze, he looked away, as though he had something to show me behind me. I turned. There, on the far wall, scrawled in fresh blood, a single sentence: "See you in the daylight." I spun back, and Zane was gone. No footfalls, no whisper, nothing but the dying echo of the boxcar's dark. My chest heaved. I dashed to the opening, stumbling into the moonlit yard. I called out his name, voice raw. Silence. The wind rattled the fence, and in that rattling I thought I heard a soft, distant laugh, an echo carried off by the night. I raced back through the yard to the fence, slid through the gap, and sprinted toward the cruiser. My radio crackled to life. Delta, calling an all clear. Backup was arriving, lights sweeping the tracks. I skidded to a halt beside my car, panting, eyes wild. I grabbed my phone and dialed dispatch. "Unit Summit," I said, voice broken. "He's gone. He left a message." I cleared my throat. "Proceed with caution. Scene is active. He's still out there." I slammed the phone shut and leaned against the cruiser, chest heaving. The boxcars loomed behind me, silent as graves. Above, pale stars blinked as if nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. Tonight was a beginning, not an end. As dawn's first light crept across the rail yard, I stared at the tracks, knowing that somewhere out there, Garrett Zane waited for me to make my next move, and I would be ready. I forced myself to swallow the bile rising in my throat as I stepped deeper into the cavernous boxcar. Every muscle coiled with tension. The stale air smelled of rust and coal dust, a tang that clung to my throat. My flashlight cut narrow arcs across pallets stacked 3 high, their wood warped and splintered. I kept my service pistol trained on the shadowed row before me, every instinct screaming that Garrett Zane could be lurking around any corner, a heartbeat away. Footsteps, my own, echoing. I advanced slowly, heels clicking against metal rivets in the floor. The boxcar's low ceiling made my light catch on overhead crossbeams, each one splashed with tracks of something dark. I forced my breath steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I thought of my family sleeping safely miles away, of the protocols that said I shouldn't be here alone, and shoved it aside. I was the one who'd followed every breadcrumb, every twisted clue, and if I turned back now, I would be handing Zane victory. I pushed around a stack of crates and almost stumbled over a coiled extension cord, stained red, soaked through on one end. My heart stuttered. I knelt, slipping on a glove, and traced a finger along its length. Dark matter, almost black, congealed blood. I flicked open my portable camera and snapped a dozen photographs. Each snap echoed, ricocheting like gunshots in that metal tube. I rose and pressed onward, boots crunching on debris. Near the far end, I saw the glint of a journal on the ground, Zane's journal, leaving a path like poisoned breadcrumbs. Pages splayed open, words written in neat block letters bleeding into the fibers. I crouched, flashlight focused on an entry. April 3rd, 2025. He's here. Goosebumps prickled my skin. Someone had been waiting for me, watching me trample through his domain, savoring my fear. A low creak behind me snapped my head around. The door at the entrance of the boxcar had slowly swung closed under its own weight, sealing me inside. My breath caught. I hurried back toward the door, muzzle raised, foot pressing against the edge of the metal threshold. The door rattled against the latch as I wrenched it upward, jammed. "Back up!" I barked into my dead radio, palm slamming on the mic, nothing but static. My own voice sounded distant, filtered through the claustrophobic metal walls. I yanked on the door again. It jolted halfway before refusing to budge further. My chest tightened. I slammed my shoulder into it. The metal shivered under the blow but held fast. My heartbeat pounded in my ears so loud I could taste it. Sweat stung my eyes as I turned back into the boxcar, flashlight sweeping every corner. No movement, but I felt it all around me. The pulse of something malevolent coiled just beyond my circle of light. I forced myself to steady my breath and moved back, toward the stacks of crates, each footstep deliberate. The journal lay on top of the nearest box. I grabbed it, flipping pages until I reached an entry titled "The Finale." Handwritten notes, diagrams of the boxcar interior, red circles marking ladder rungs and escape hatches. At the bottom, a terse line, "He must face his own design." Underneath, my badge number scrawled in blood-red ink. The hairs on the back of my neck pricked. Zane had turned this place into a death trap, one I had walked into. Was there a ladder? A hatch above? I lifted the journal higher, scanning. Yes, a small hatch near the ceiling, maybe 6 feet up. I ran a hand along the nearest crate, searching for handholds. Splinters tore at my glove until I found a rough edge that would support my weight. My heart roared as I climbed, one rung, two, each squeaking under my weight. The hatch rim was cold steel. I pressed my frozen knuckles against it and heaved upward. Air rushed in as the hatch gave way, sliding open with a groan. Moonlight spilled down, illuminating my sweat-slicked face. I dumped the journal over the edge, using both hands to haul myself up into the night. I dropped onto the gravel beside the boxcar, heart slamming. Above, a shadow detached itself from the dark interior and leapt into the weeds beyond the fence. A tall figure draped in black. I scrambled to my feet, pistol raised and finger trembling on the trigger. "Garrett, Zane!" I bellowed, voice ragged. My words echoed across the rail yard. He halted 50 yards away, half hidden in moonlit grass. I advanced, every step a crash against the silence. "This ends now. Get on your knees." He tilted his head as though considering something. No panic in his posture, just a measured calm. "Detective Summers, you've escaped the cage, but the trap remains." He vanished into the weedy undergrowth, moving with sinuous grace. I hesitated only a fraction, then pursued, stepping over rusted ties and discarded debris. My flashlight flickered, beam dancing across old freight containers, sending mottled shadows skittering. My pistol was heavy in my hand, comfort and curse both. I called after him, voice raw. "Show yourself." The weeds parted abruptly, and he stood not 10 feet away, face illuminated by my flashlight. Blood smeared beneath his eyes like war paint. His lips curved in a slow smile. "You're almost there," he said, pointing toward the tracks that stretched into darkness. "At the center, you'll find what you seek." I strained to see past his silhouette, but the horizon offered nothing but endless rails and empty ties. "Where?" I pressed, heart hammering. He gestured again to the east, where the tracks split in 2 directions, one leading back toward the city, the other curving off into the dead farmland beyond. "Choose," he said softly. "Which way?" His question felt like a guillotine blade against my throat. I swallowed, mind spinning. I thought of my family, my vows, and the cold case in Johnson County still unsolved. My vision tunneled. He'd lured me through a ring of fear across county lines, across midnight locales, only to stand here and dare me to make the final choice. Turn back or chase him into the void. I squared my shoulders. This doesn't end in choice, it ends in justice. I moved forward, stepping over the rail toward the farmland path. He laughed, a thin hollow sound that scraped across my nerves. Then he was gone, melting into the black as though he'd never been there. My breath fogged the beam of my flashlight as I aimed at the point where he'd stood. Empty. My radio crackled at last. Backup. Distant voices, urgent and clipped. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by dread. I couldn't let Zane escape again, not after everything. I keyed my mic, voice low. All units converge on East Spur. Suspect fled northbound across the embankment. He's headed into the farmland. Use lights and sirens. Do not engage until visual confirmation. I clipped the mic and plunged forward, flashlight bobbing over the rail ties. My boots sank in damp earth as I followed the weeds, hand gripping the pistol so tightly my knuckles went white. Every step took me deeper into a world devoid of sound, but for my own ragged breath and the distant wail of sirens. The farmland stretched out, a wide-open theater where any mistake could be fatal. I moved without hesitation, instincts on high alert. The moon had dipped behind clouds, leaving me to navigate by the scant illumination of my flashlight and the approaching glow of blue and red strobes. I strode past rusted fences and broken fences posts, heart hammering. The gravel road running parallel to the tracks was slick with dew, reflecting the strobe lights like an angry mirror. At the edge of the field, backup formed a line. Echo and Delta flanking me, rifles raised. We swept left to right as we advanced, clearing the brush. Footsteps, this time not mine. I froze, light flicking toward, a clump of mesquite. A figure darted, then froze in my beam. Zane, crouched low, eyes gleaming silver. He rose with fluid motion, arms lifted in mock surrender. "Detective, you made it through my labyrinth," he said, voice calm. But the maze was never about escape. His words dripped with satisfaction. I leveled my pistol. "End of the line, Zane. Nobody else gets hurt. You come out now." Delta advanced at my nod, pressing the barrel toward Zane's chest. Echo moved to cover my six. The strobe lights danced across the field. Zane surveyed us, tallying our numbers. Then he took a single step forward, raising an empty hand. "Very efficient," he said, tone almost complimentary. "But tomorrow, someone else will pick up where I left off." My grip tightened at that. He turned abruptly and bolted toward the tracks, sprinting with a predator's grace. Instinct flared. I shouted, "Stop!" and fired a warning shot overhead. The crack echoed across the fields. Delta and Echo opened up, bullets hitting the embankment with thuds. He sprang into the riverbed drainage culvert beneath the tracks, too small for any of us to follow. I dashed to the culvert entrance, flashlight beam searching the darkness below. The stale air in the culvert smelled of mold and decay. My chest heaved. I unholstered my radio. He's in the culvert at track level. I need a breaching team with gas masks. My fingertips hovered over the mic. "We cannot let him slip this time." Static, then a voice. "Copy, Summit. Gas team en route." I took a deep breath, aiming my light into the yawning tunnel. The black seemed to swallow even the brightest beam. My mind reeled. Zane had evaded us again, slipping through the ground beneath our feet. If he got away here, he'd vanish into the network of drainage tunnels beneath Odessa, disappearing like a ghost. I weighed my options. Alone, I could pursue and risk losing him in the dark, or hold position, letting the gas team flush him out. My pulse hammered in my ears. This place reeked of advantage for a man as cunning as Zane. I glanced at Delta and Echo, their faces pale but resolute. We together were stronger than every riddle, every trap he laid. I lifted my radio. All units brace. We go in together. No one fanning out. Stick close. We do this by the book. My voice rasped firm. Moments later, the gas team arrived. Ghostly figures in hazmat suits brandishing canisters. I felt the promise of dawn on the horizon. A thin promise that tomorrow might bring answers. I checked my gear, pistol in one hand, canister in the other. On my mark, I said. Delta, Echo, cover the rear. Gas team with me. My heart pounded so loud I thought the culvert walls would shake. I flicked the safety off my weapon. I pressed the canister valve and released a hiss of amber gas into the culvert's gaping maw. A pale fog rolled over the threshold, curling fingers of mist hugging the ground, obscuring the first two rungs of the ladder leading down. Delta and Echo leveled their rifles at the darkness as I led the team forward, boots crunching over displaced gravel and twisted rebar. My flashlight beam cut through the haze, each step illuminated against the black. The stale air stung my throat, and I tasted panic on every breath, but I kept moving. The culvert sloped downward sharply, forcing us to lean forward, shoulders braced against the damp concrete walls. Every echo of our footfalls sounded magnified, our presence announced to whatever lurked within. I let the gas swirl ahead, hoping to flush Zane out, but in my gut I knew his mind thrived on fear and control. He would anticipate this, dodge it, vanish like smoke through the fissures in the city's underbelly. The tunnel pitched beneath the interstate, the far end swallowed by deeper darkness. My hand tightened on my pistol. Spread out, but keep visual contact, I hissed. Delta flanked the left wall. Echo hugged the right. The drone operators back at the station had cautioned that these drainage tunnels branched unpredictably. One wrong turn, and we could be lost or separated. I replayed that warning in my head, remembering how every environment Zane had set up felt tailor-made. The diner with its single napkin, the convenience store's alarm, the feed store's hay bale, Copperwood Drive's closet. Now this. A labyrinth beneath the city, unseen by anyone except him. We approached a fork in the tunnel, one arm leading into utter blackness, the other lit faintly by a trickle of daylight seeping through a fractured manhole cover half a mile ahead. Delta whispered, "Which way, Summit?" I swallowed, voice low. "Follow the gas density. He'll avoid the thickest patches." I limped slightly. My ankle had twisted on a rebar splice, and I had to grit my teeth to keep moving. The amber haze trailed thicker to the left arm. I beckoned them on. The culvert narrowed until we crouched, shoulders hunched, shoving forward with careful steps. My radio crackled with static, a reminder of how isolated we were. The silence between static bursts felt like an expanse where Zane could speak to us, whispering from the tunnel's depths. My mind rebelled at the thought of subterranean voices, fragile, artificial. We'd come this far. Turning back wasn't an option. Then a soft sound, the drip of water, distant but regular, and beneath it a subtle scuff, like a boot scraping stone. Echo's light darted to the right. A bare patch of wall bore a fresh handprint, smudged in dark crimson. My breath caught. He'd been here, close enough to leave his mark intentionally. I snapped a photograph with my tactical camera, willing the image to memorialize the moment in case nothing else remained. My legs trembled as we pressed on. The tunnel's pitch lessened, and ahead I saw the glimmer of steel ladder rungs bolted into the wall. Relief and dread mingled. The ladder led up toward the fractured light, our exit point. Zane had probably chosen that spot knowing I'd chase the light, hungry for deliverance. A sense of déjà vu hit me hard. Every scene from the night had promised salvation, then delivered another puzzle. I steeled myself as I approached the ladder. Delta ascended first, hand over hand, until he clambered out of the hatch, then lowered a rope. Echo followed. I gripped the rope and pulled, feeling the taut line steady me as I hoisted myself up. The hatch scraped open to reveal the base of a storm drain in a vacant lot behind an abandoned warehouse. The cellar door had been wedged open from the inside, leaving just enough room to climb through. Dust motes danced in the stray daylight. I peered over the edge, empty, silent except for the hiss of the gas still drifting out of the tunnel. I climbed out and dropped to the overgrown grass, heart hammering. Delta and Echo joined me, weapons raised. We scanned the perimeter. The vacant lot stretched around us, dotted with rusting barrels and tall weeds. To the north, the cracked asphalt of an old loading bay led toward the warehouse. To the south, a chain-link fence with a gaping hole opened onto a field of waist-high grass. I took a breath of fresh air, sharp and cold, and flicked my headlamp off automatic. My mind was thinning. The motion left a swirling blur between the edges of vision. I blinked it away and keyed my mic. Theta, perimeter's clear. No sign of him here, but I bet he slipped out before the hatch opened. I clenched my jaw. Let's fan out. Delta on the warehouse, Echo along the fence. We split. I peeled left around the warehouse's crumbling foundation. Our boots made muted thuds on broken concrete. My pistol remained up, cold steel against my palm. As I circled the building, my light traced discarded pieces of pallet, a tangled net of wire, and spray-painted warnings scrawled in black. Turn back. Underneath, someone had written in red coordinate numbers. 3 sets of digits I recognized. Mel's Diner's address, Quickstop's GPS, and the feed store's lat long. The same locations that formed his twisted ring. He'd marked them here too in the heart of his maze. My stomach clenched. He hadn't forgotten a single moment of our ordeal. An abrupt movement caught my eye, something shifting behind a collapsed section of wall. I eased forward, pistol steady, and swept my beam over the rubble. A thin thread of fabric hung from a protruding rebar, part of Zane's hood. I pressed forward, voice low. "Zane, it's over. Come out with your hands up." No answer. Just the hiss of wind through the weeds beyond the fence and the distant crash of a shifting barrel inside the warehouse. I edged closer. Each step felt suspended, like I was wading through molasses. My boots scraped metal shards. Splinters bit at the sole of my foot. I peered into the shadow behind the wall. Nothing. Only the deeper gloom of the warehouse interior. I radioed, "Delta, cover me." He acknowledged, and I stepped through the wall's gap. The warehouse floor was slick with old oil mixed with gravel. Support beams groaned overhead. My light flicked across stacks of broken crates, rat-gnawed boxes, and there, footprints made in damp mud, leading toward a half-open service door at the far end. I followed, heart lurching with every crunch of debris. The door opened onto a narrow alley between buildings, moonlight dancing off puddles. I paused at the threshold. Echo's silhouette stood at the alley's mouth, rifle leveled. She whispered, "I saw him slip between the containers to the east." I nodded, signaling my approach. We advanced in tandem, weapons ready, until we reached a cluster of rusted shipping containers. Between them, a narrow gap led deeper into darkness. I pressed forward, muscles taut, unwilling to break my gaze. Then the unmistakable sound of pen scratching paper, like Zane furiously writing something. My blood froze. I moved closer, light quivering, until I caught sight. Zane crouched inside the gap, jotting on a fresh sheet clipped to a small board. His hood hung low, his face tilted away. The only light was the moon filtering through overhead gaps. He was writing, but at the moment he sensed me, he paused and looked up. I snapped my light full force on him. The beam struck his face. Skin pale, eyes glinting, lips parted in a half grin. He rose slowly, journal in one hand, pen in the other, and dropped the pen to the ground without a sound. Behind him, the container wall bore new writing in chalk. "Congratulations, Detective. You found the finale." Beneath, a simple doodle of interlocking circles with your badge number at the center. My throat felt raw. I leveled my pistol. "Garrett Zane, it's over." My voice cracked like a whip. His eyes glittered at me, a spark of respect, or was it amusement? He cradled the journal. The alley seemed impossibly tight, the walls breathing darkness. The heap of discarded debris at his feet looked innocuous. An old plastic bucket overturned, lid propped on its side. I recognized that lid, identical to the bucket at the feed store. My heart slammed against my ribs. Before I could issue another command, Zane moved with unnerving quickness, sidestepping behind the bucket. The journal vanished behind his back. I fired once. Lightning crack, echo under corrugated metal, but my shot caught only air. He emerged from the shadow, journal in hand, his expression drifting between triumph and something sorrowful. "A pity you never learned the truth, Detective," he said, voice low. "But now you have the final entry." He tossed the journal toward me. It spun end over end, pages fluttering until it landed at my feet. I stepped back, flashlight beam and pistol trained on him, then bent to scoop up the journal. Its cover was leather, torn and worn. The pages inside were soaked through, the ink smudged. I flipped to the last entry. My pulse thundered as I read, "April 4th, 2025. Congratulations, Detective. You've traversed my path and arrived at your center. Now look closer. The final circle reveals what you cannot forgive in yourself. The ones you couldn't save, the lives you let slip away. I offered you the chance to redeem them, to chase ghosts across Odessa, but you chose duty, protocol, survival, and for that I salute you. Now, write your ending." My vision blurred. I looked up, but Zane had disappeared again, slipping off between containers like smoke through fingers. Only the draft of wind betrayed where he'd gone. My colleagues surged into the alley behind me, shouts ricocheting. "Summit, do you copy?" I fumbled with the radio, my voice hollow. I have the journal." He's gone. Behind me, flashlight beams danced over the chalked circles on the container wall, highlighting my badge number at the center. I stepped closer, tracing the interconnected rings with a gloved finger. They radiated outward, linking every scene of the night. Diner, truck, store, feed, houses, culvert, and warehouse. But also linking me in the center, a single point surrounded by my regrets and failures. I felt the weight of years settle around my shoulders. The night had unfolded like a synecdoche of my career. Small puzzles leading to one vast, impossible portrait of my own limits. Zane had orchestrated every moment, pressing me into confession without a single word of confession from me. And in the end, the final plea was for me to write my own ending, whatever that meant. I stepped back, journal tucked under my arm, and called for Delta and Echo. We exited the alley into the chill dawn air, sirens fading as the sun rose behind us. The chalked wall stood silent, the bucket lid overturned. Pennsylvania blue chalk still fresh. I turned to the warehouse, its corrugated walls humming in the morning breeze, a tomb of secrets barely uncovered. In the middle of that forgotten lot, surrounded by the detritus of Zane's designs, I realized the story hadn't ended. The names of those I couldn't save, the ones who inspired each scene, would linger in my memory, demanding a redress I didn't know how to give. The journal's final plea echoed in my mind: write your ending. And I understood that the true horror wasn't just Zane's path, but the one I walked every day, chasing calls and regrets alike. I looked at the horizon, sunrise bleeding through a haze of dust and stray clouds, indifferent and vast. I pulled out my radio. All units, set perimeter, secure evidence. Zane's escaped again. But we have the journal, we have the map. My voice was steadier now, hardened by the night's crucible. My boots sank into the gravel of the service road as I marched back toward my cruiser, every muscle still trembling from the adrenaline that wouldn't let go. In my chest, the weight of Zane's final challenge settled like a stone. Write your ending. The leather journal pressed against my side, its edges frayed, each page bearing the blood and sweat of a man whose entire life had become a dark script, one in which I was both protagonist and prisoner. The dawn light stretched pale across the lot, illuminating the overturned bucket, the chalked circles, the container wall that bore my badge number at the center of his twisted web. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see Garrett Zane's shadow slipping away into the growing light, but there was only empty air and the distant rumble of the highway. Delta and Echo fell in beside me, their faces drawn but alert. Echo's voice was soft. We found nothing else. Delta shook his head. He slipped through our fingers again. How does he keep doing it? Their uncertainty mirrored my own. After everything, diner, stolen truck, bloody rope, convenience store alarm, feed store photograph, Copperwood Drive break-in, culvert trap, warehouse finale, Zane had managed to evade capture every single time. Even now, with a half-dozen scenes behind us, he'd vanished into anonymity, leaving only the specter of his crimes and that journal. We reached the cruisers. The tactical team was packing up their equipment. Canisters, gas masks, drones whisked back into their cases. My cruiser's engine was running, lights still strobing, radio crackling with traffic updates from the morning shift. I slid into the driver's seat and set the journal on the passenger seat, its spine worn and pages peeking between the covers. A single line from the final entry haunted me. Now, write your ending. I reached across and flipped it open to a blank page at the back. Sudden impulse seized me. I found myself gripping a pen from my shirt pocket and pressing it to the page. My hand hovered above the leather face, knuckles white, but I couldn't write. How could I summarize a night like this in words? How could any notation do justice to fear sculpted across 6 crime scenes, to guilt dredged from cold case drawers, to the culmination of someone's private vendetta played out under my badge? I closed the journal with a soft snap and exhaled. My breath fogged the windshield. Outside, the day had fully arrived, a mundane morning shift now taking over, cars and trucks streaming down the road, oblivious to the horrors we'd lived through just hours before. I started the engine and scanned the lot one last time. The storm drain manhole cover lay slightly askew, the warehouse door sealed with police tape, the horizon a line of scrub brush and distant oil rigs. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving a hollow ache in its place. My hands shook on the wheel. Memories cut like glass. The hiss of the diner's neon sign, the scuff of footprints in the feed store, the broken closet door on Copperwood Drive, the suffocating darkness of the culvert, the chalked warning on the warehouse wall. Each echo of the night wove a thread through my mind, knitting them into a tapestry I couldn't unsee. I reached for my radio. "Dispatch, this is Summit. I'm en route to the precinct. Need evidence techs here for processing." My voice sounded distant, like someone else. The dispatcher acknowledged, giving me an address that seemed strangely out of place. "Affirmative, Unit Summit. We'll have techs there in 5. I clicked the mic off and threw the cruiser into gear. The ride back to the station was silent, broken only by the low hum of tires on asphalt. I idled at the precinct's front lot, killing the engine. Above me, the American flag snapped once in the breeze before stalling, limp. I unbuckled and stepped out, journal in hand. Inside, the hallways were already crowded with uniformed officers in fresh uniforms, crisp shirts, starched collars, ready for a day of paperwork and patrols. It all seemed too ordinary, too clean, like a thin veneer laid over the raw wound of last night. Sergeant Lawson met me at the evidence locker door, arms crossed. She raised an eyebrow at the journal. "Well?" she asked, voice low. "Was it worth reading?" I shrugged, feeling the full weight of exhaustion and defeat. It's his confession, and his challenge. He wants me to finish the story. I held out the journal. "It's evidence. Seal it." She took it carefully, nodding. "We'll catalog it. Maybe forensics can pull something more. In the meantime, we'll beef up patrols in the culvert system in that warehouse district. He can't hide forever." Her eyes were steady, but behind them flickered doubt. "Get some rest, Summit. You've earned it." I managed a half smile. "Rest? Yeah." I turned away, heading for my office. My steps felt leaden. In the small cubicle, I set my keys on the desk and turned on the lamp. The walls were decorated with commendations, photos of family, a calendar with scheduled time off, reminders of a life beyond the badge. I sat and stared at the phone, the blank screen reflecting my tension. On the desk beside it lay a fresh cup of coffee, something a desk sergeant must have placed there. I reached for it, hands shaking. The steam curled upward, carrying the scent of bitter relief. I took a sip, eyes closing as warmth spread through me. For a moment, I let myself imagine normalcy. A quiet evening at home, bedtime stories for my kids, a laugh with my wife. But that illusion shattered in my mind. I set the cup down and reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out a small photograph, worn at the edges, taken years ago at a precinct picnic. The family xiaoing in the sun, me in uniform, arm around my partner's shoulder, kids chasing balloons. I remembered that day, the lightness, the promise of safety under the shield. I flipped it over. Carved into the back, in my own neat handwriting, was our family motto, "Protect and serve every day." I closed my eyes and whispered, "Protect and serve." The words hit me like a benediction, then like a curse. I opened my eyes and stared at the phone. The blank screen seemed to taunt me. "Write your ending." But how? Could the next chapter be justice served? Or would it be the ongoing nightmare of chasing someone who worshipped fear? The phone buzzed. I jumped, nearly spilling my coffee. On the screen, a text from dispatch. "Hold for command meeting at 0900. Be there." I exhaled, shoulders sagging. I rose and slipped into my jacket, tucking the family photo into my breast pocket next to my badge. As I crossed the office to the door, I glanced back at the desk where the coffee sat steaming in the morning light. At 0900, I joined the command staff in the conference room. Sheriff's deputies, tactical commanders, detectives, all wielding grim expressions. Lawson stood, clearing her throat. "We're dealing with an organized predator. Garrett Zane is not just a killer. He's a vanishing act, a puppeteer pulling strings behind the scenes. We need every asset: drones, K-9 units, undercover patrols, social media tip lines. We'll canvass every dumpster behind that warehouse, every manhole in that culvert system, interview every neighbor near Blackwell Road. I sat forward, heart pounding. Every plan felt reactive, too little, too late. But I nodded in agreement, contributing CCTV logs, gas purchase records, utility maps. My face was impassive, but inside I felt torn between relief at having a plan and dread at watching it unfold. Thousands of details, millions of variables. Anyone could let him slip away again. By midday, press teams gathered outside the station. Cameras, microphones, blurbs streaming across smartphones. Odessa Night stalker strikes again. Police officer targeted in twisted game. City on edge as suspect remains at large. The reporter's questions buzzed like flies, but I answered with the practiced calm of a man who'd told the same story a dozen times. No mention of 6 crime scenes, no hint of the corners I'd chased him through. Just the promise: we will find him. Later, back in my office, I sat behind the desk reviewing maps and photos. The morning sunlight burned away the shadows of the night, but in my mind, every detail glowed in sharp relief. I traced the circle on my annotated map again: Mel's Diner, Quick Stop, Feed Store, Copperwood Drive, Interstate 10-mile marker, Warehouse Alley, Blackwell Roadhouse, and the culvert under I-10, the center point that led us here, and now back to the warehouse's shipping containers. Below the map, I left a note to myself: follow the circle. I stared at those words, realizing they were both instruction and confession, that my life had become that circle, each shift another loop in the same trap, and that the only way out would be to break the pattern, to write a new ending that didn't replay last night's horrors. The clock ticked toward quitting time, but I stayed. I opened the leather journal and flipped through its pages one last time. His neat handwriting, his taunting messages, the slow build of psychological terror. I paused on the last blank page, pen in hand. I stared at the empty space, my reflection wavering in the polished wood of the cover. "Write your ending," he had said. But I realized this was my story now. His ending was his to write, in custody or in the grave. Mine would be different. I set the journal aside, picking up the family photo instead. I pressed it to my heart. I rose and walked to the window, looking out over the city I'd sworn to protect. The oil rigs west of the town glinted in the late afternoon light. The culvert ran quiet beneath the interstate. The diner neon was still dark. Somewhere out there, Garrett Zane plotted his next move, or maybe he'd surrendered to anonymity, content in the knowledge that he'd owned half my soul. I closed my eyes. Then, on the journal's desk, I picked up a fresh sheet of evidence tag paper. With a deliberate stroke, I wrote, Case 1147 Suspect, Garrett Zane, alias Unknown Charges, Unlawful Restraint, Attempted Murder, Kidnapping, Psychological Torture. Status: Active manhunt in progress. No captures. Notes: Suspect's pattern forms a closed loop across 7 crime scenes. Predicted next location at culvert exit. Potential access points: abandoned railway, industrial alleys, subterranean tunnels. Action plan: deploy 24/7 surveillance on all manholes, utility grids, and warehouse perimeters. Establish rapid response protocol for civilian reports. Coordinate multi-jurisdiction task force. I set the pen down and underlined active manhunt in progress. Then I exhaled, feeling the first real sense of agency since midnight. Not letting the circle define me, but using it to trap him. Behind me, the journal lay open, a testament to his madness. I picked it up gently, treating it like the evidence it was, and slid it into an evidence locker with the hardened care of a man who understood fear. I locked the door. The final page remained blank. Zane had left me that canvas to paint on, but I would never write my own fear across it. Instead, I would fill it with facts, dates, times, operations, arrests, justice served. My ending would not be a confession, but a conclusion. I turned out the desk lamp and walked out of the office as the sun dipped below the skyline, the station's fluorescent lights humming into life. Outside, sirens blared, cruisers mobilized, officers scrambled. The hunt was on, and for the first time since the hang-up call, I felt something beyond dread. I felt purpose. A new page had been written, not in blood or ink of terror, but in the steadfast lines of resolve. I climbed into my cruiser, the leather journal locked away, and roared the engine to life. As I drove toward the heart of Odessa, toward the next call, toward the next beat of a city that slept uneasy under a predator's shadow, I whispered under my breath, "I will write the ending." And out on the empty roads, somewhere beyond the glare of streetlights and present danger, I knew Garrett Zane was listening. I eased out of the station just after midnight, the hum of the engine louder than usual in the silent bay. The dispatcher's words were still rattling through the cruiser's radio. Unit 12, abandoned vehicle on County Road 112, south of Odessa. License plate doesn't match vehicle, no driver at scene. I glanced at the dashboard clock, 12:07 a.m., and felt the familiar ache behind my eyes. 14 years on the force, and nights like this never get easier. Not when you know that every simple call can spiral into something you can't unsee. County Road 112 stretched ahead like a ribbon of black tar under weak moonlight. Fields of mesquite and tumbleweeds flattened by the wind on either side. I clicked the mic, 10-4, ETA 3 minutes. My hand settled on the steering wheel, knuckles white under the thin leather. The air through the cracked window tasted like oil and sand, and I swallowed against a sudden dryness in my throat. My partner, Diaz, was off tonight. He'd claimed, "Rest of the world needs my silent vigil," but I knew he was nursing a headache. Backup was at least 20 minutes away if anything went sideways. The road curved, and I saw the soft glow of the station's neon sign fade in my rear view. Up ahead, the lone street lamp flickered over a rust-spotted Taurus pulled halfway onto the shoulder. My headlights grazed its side, illuminating the dent above the rear tire like a bruised eye. I killed the engine, and everything went dark but for the lamp and my dome light. I sat there for 3 slow beats, listening to my heart thudding beneath my Kevlar vest. Stepping out, I heard my boots crunch gravel, a sound that always feels too loud at night. Somewhere in the distance, a jackrabbit bolted across the road, kicking up dust. I holstered my flashlight and taser, keeping both hands free, and moved to the front of the Taurus. The dome light inside still glowed, casting harsh white down on the cracked vinyl seats. I tapped the driver's window, no answer. I nudged the door handle, unlocked. "Dispatch, I've got an open door," I reported, voice even. The radio gave me nothing but static in reply, that wet dog crackle that always sets my teeth on edge. I clicked the flashlight on and swept the interior. A single pair of gloves draped over the shift knob. A coffee cup stained and half full in the cup holder, and an empty car seat buckled in the back. The latch indicator was red, trunk ajar. I exhaled and bent down, probing the latch. The trunk popped, and the lid rattled as I lifted it. Inside lay more empty space, save for a muddy sneaker resting between the folded spare tire and the scuffed floor mat. I pointed my light at it. Size 5, no laces, soaked through with sweat and dirt. My mind jumped to a missing child case in Johnson County, still unsolved this year. That sneaker might belong to someone out there right now, someone was looking for. I closed the trunk quietly and circled the car. There were no other footprints in the gravel. No sign of forced entry, no blood, no dropped belongings, just that sneaker, left like a clue from someone who vanished in a hurry. I straightened and allowed my eyes to adjust. Down the road, the convenience store's motion sensor alarm clicked on, the yellow security lights buzzing to life. I jogged over, every breath kicking up plumes of dust. The store's glass front was smeared, like someone tried to wipe away fingerprints. I hit the lock button on my vest until the cuffs rattled, then pressed a shoulder to the glass door, locked. I pounded once, nothing. Twice, just the echo. Retrieving my spare key from the ignition, I slipped it into the lock and turned. The latch clicked open, and the door swung inward with a low groan. The alarm screamed in my face, metal shrieking over the empty aisles. I stood in the threshold, flashlight sweeping from floor to ceiling. Shelves were half emptied, cans scattered like casualties. No bodies, no shoplifted goods tossed aside, just toppled displays and broken cardboard. A rat skittered across the light beam, disappearing over spilled cereal boxes. My pulse throbbed in my temples as I edged in, every sense straining. The stench was the first thing I registered. Something sour, metallic, like spoiled meat rotting under the sun. I sucked in a breath and forced it down, reminding myself this was still just a routine alarm call. Nothing supernatural waiting in the back of aisle 3. I clicked off the alarm switch behind the counter, and the screaming stopped. Silence fell, heavy as wet towels. I checked the register. Drawer open, empty, no sign of forced entry. Whoever was here had a key or knew the code. I called out, "This is the Odessa PD. Nobody's inside. Step out with your hands up." My voice crackled through the dead quiet, and for a moment I thought I heard a soft shuffle toward the back. I moved along the empty end caps, flashlight illuminating dew-dropped paths leading to the back door. The lock bolt was still extended, no forced breach. I tested the handle, locked. I drew my taser and radioed dispatch. Subject possibly fled through back door, grid the lot for footprints. No response. The static ate my words. I exhaled, holstering the taser and unsnapping my cuffs. I circled back to the front, tracing the muddy sneaker's path with my eyes as it cut across the parking lot toward Interstate 10. That highway never sleeps. The rumble of big rigs thrummed low in the distance. I clicked on my mic anyway. Suspect tracks lead eastbound off County Road 112 toward Interstate. Crickets chirped. No dispatcher. The lot lay deserted except for the gas pumps across the street. I glanced that way, noticing one sedan parked beneath the broken canopy lights, engine off, windows dark. I hit the unlock on my cruiser door and climbed back in, leaving my breath fogging the window. I switched on the overhead lights, flooding the lot in red and blue. The sedan's driver door creaked as I approached. I swept my light inside. Empty, save for a damp jacket tossed on the passenger seat. I touched the fabric, still warm. Somebody had only just left. No weapon, no ID, just that jacket, heavy with the smell of sweat and diesel exhaust. I jotted notes in my pad, every line a hammer on my nerves. Whoever this was had been here, watched me. Sirens echoed then, a distant wee-woo that grew louder. Diaz's car rolled in, spotlight scanning the horizon. I lowered my shoulders, relief crashing through me like a wave. I gave him a nod and pointed at the closed store, the haunted aisle 3, the empty pumps, The lone sneaker on County Road 112. He hit his mic. "Dispatch, we need a crime scene unit out here ASAP." I slumped against the cruiser, rubbing my eyes. Underneath that Texan sky, the land felt endless and empty, dotted with shadows that refused to shift. I swallowed, thinking back on every missing person file stacked in my locker. Cold leads, dead ends, unanswered phone calls. Tonight's call felt different, though. It smelled like fear. Fear fresh enough to leave footprints, bleed into a convenience store like spilled coffee. Diaz left to run license plates. I stayed by the Taurus. The motion lights clicked overhead, making strobing shadows that danced on the cracked windshield. I peered in again, half expecting movement. Nothing. My radio finally cut through with a scratchy voice. "Unit 1-2, confirm last?" Affirm. Abandoned sedan, open trunk with child sneaker. Empty store with unlocked rear door, subject tracks heading east. My fingers trembled as I spoke. The breeze kicked up, rattling the broken street lamp. I shivered, reaching for my coffee, but the cup was cold and empty. That night was only just beginning. My gut told me the real work lay ahead. In the silent neighborhood down the road, behind locked doors with no porch lights, where alarms screamed and no one answered. And in that car seat, empty and waiting like a promise unfulfilled. I tapped the Taurus's hood, whispering, "Let's see what you're hiding." Then I drew my Tauser, swapped it for my Glock, and moved off into the dark, ready for whatever came next, even if it was something I'd rather never see again. I stepped off the cracked pavement of the convenience store's lot and onto the narrow shoulder of County Road 112, Glock heavy in my hand, ears straining for any hint of movement. The breeze carried the distant roar of 18-wheelers on Interstate 10, a constant reminder that civilization lay just beyond the horizon, but here in the shadows, it felt like another world. Gravel crunched under my boots as I retraced the sneaker's tracks eastbound, toward a row of houses half hidden by mesquite and broken fencing. The first house I passed had its porch light shattered, glass fragments scattered like frozen tears. I swept the beam across the doorway, deadbolt locked, no signs of forced entry. The front yard was overrun with tumbleweed and discarded beer cans. I crouched, examining fresh footprints, one matching the lone sneaker's tread, the other too small for an adult, like a child's size 5. My chest tightened. Whoever had been here wasn't alone. My mind flicked back to that Johnson County case, the missing girl they never found. This couldn't be a coincidence. I holstered the Glock and drew my Taser instead, less lethal but enough to stop someone in a desperate sprint. I knocked 3 times, palm flat against the splintered wood. "Odessa PD, I need anyone inside to show me their hands." My voice echoed against the empty street. Silence answered. I eased the door open with my shoulder, sweeping inside. The living room smelled of mildew and stale cigarettes. A recliner lay overturned, cushions torn open, stuffing spilling onto the floor like pale guts. I peeled back a cushion, nothing but chipped paint and old receipts. I clicked off the safety on the Taser and moved deeper in, feet kicking aside broken picture frames. One frame held a photograph of a little girl with curly hair and a crooked grin. Someone had carefully torn her head from the image. The jagged paper edge glinted under my flashlight beam. My heart skipped. I shoved that frame aside and forced myself to keep going. In the kitchen, the sink was full of murky water, dishes stacked high, cabinets swung open, their contents scattered. A half-empty bottle of prescription pills, a child's sippy cup caked with mold, a silver locket broken in 2. I radioed dispatch with trembling fingers. Unit 1-2, possible domestic disturbance. House is trashed, evidence of minors. Need CPS notified and forensics out ASAP. The reply was slow, static, and then, "Copy that. Backup ETA 5 minutes." I exhaled, but tension knotted my shoulders. I followed muddy footprints through a hallway to a bedroom door. The carpet was stained, dark, sticky in places. I paused and pressed my finger to the stain. It was waterlogged but had a faint chemical smell, like bleach mixed with something foul. I backed up and checked the knob, unlocked. I kicked the door open, surfacing adrenaline like hot blood in my veins. Inside, a low moonbeam shone through a torn curtain onto a mattress on the floor. On it lay a small pile of clothes, tiny pants and a pink t-shirt. I moved closer, voice softer now. "Hey, kiddo, I'm here to help." No answer. My foot brushed something cold. I bent and touched it. A child's doll, porcelain cracked, one glass eye missing. I frowned. Had the suspect staged this, or was this some sick trophy? I swept the room again. In the corner by the wall, a hatch in the floor boarded over with a plywood sheet. The edges were splintered, pry marks fresh. I knelt and pried at the boards with my fingers, the wood giving with a groan. Below was a cramped crawl space, darkness so thick it swallowed my flashlight beam. Something scraped against the wood from below, a soft thump. My breath caught. I radioed Diaz. "I'm at a hatch in bedroom floor. Movement under here." He crackled back. "Hold your position." Units en route. Swallowing hard, I shone my light down the gap. Flecks of dust motes drifted in the beam like slow-falling snow. The thumping came again, rhythmic, deliberate. A child's heartbeat, maybe. I slid a knee onto the edge, bracing my weight, and whispered, "It's all right? You're safe with me." My voice sounded small and brittle in that vast quiet. The thump stopped. My chest stuttered. Someone was listening. My radio sputtered. "Officer Collins, back up 2 mics out." Relief washed over me, followed by guilt I couldn't place. This was my call. I couldn't just wait. I shoved my elbow against the board. It cracked, splinters biting into my forearm. I gave a stronger push and the hatch flipped open. Down in the darkness, I saw the outline of a small figure curled against the far wall, knees drawn up. I knelt on the edge, shining my light down. The child's face, dirty, tear-streaked, tilted upward, wide-eyed. She looked no older than 8. Her shirt hung damp and threadbare. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and whispered, "Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. I'm Officer Collins. We're going to get you out." She didn't move, just stared, eyes reflecting the beam like dark gems. Behind her, something shifted. A man's boot. My pulse jumped. I caught movement at the edge of the light. A crooked limb, an arm stretched out, then pulled back. Someone else was down there. "Show yourself," I bellowed, voice cracking. No reply. I aimed my taser down, thumb on the trigger. Then came a rasping breath, low and uneven, like metal dragged across concrete. My stomach knotted. I forced myself to climb down, every step cautious. The air in the crawl space was thick, suffocating. I pressed the light on the figure first, then rotated to find the other. He sat with his back to me, skin pale under his hoodie, hair matted. He jerked upright at my footsteps, eyes like flint in the dark. I shone the light into his face. A man in his mid-30s, hollowed cheeks and broken stare. His hands gripped a rusty pipe. My finger tensed on the taser. Rhythm and speed meant everything here. "Put it down and back away," I ordered. The pipe dropped with a clang, and he sank onto his heels, face wet with tears or sweat. I couldn't tell. Behind him, the little girl slid toward me, silent and still. I crouched, extending a hand. "You're safe now," I said softly. She sniffled, tears glinting. I offered her a hand. She hesitated, then took it. I lifted her up, cradling her like a mother might. She weighed less than I expected. I felt her body tremble. "I've got you," I murmured, more to myself than to her. Sirens screamed above, red and blue flickering through the hatch. Diaz's heavy boots pounded down the steps. He shone his light into my eyes, and I realized I was trembling too. I let him guide us out. The man rose slowly, tears streaking down his face. He didn't resist cuffs. He just stood there, flinching at the light. I escorted them to my cruiser. The little girl huddled in the back seat, clutching the cracked doll. The man sat in the passenger seat, head bowed. I climbed in beside them, radioing dispatch. 1 juvenile and adult male in custody. Child in protective services custody. Suspect in handcuffs. Crime scene unit to 112 County Road. The cruiser's heater clicked on, warm air pushing away the chill from the day's first light. I glanced in the rear view at the girl's reflection. She stared back, eyes dark but curious. I thought of my own daughter, safe at home. My chest tightened with guilt and relief. I reached back, placing a hand gently on the girl's shoulder. She looked at me, and I nodded. We sat in silence as the sun bled orange across the horizon, painting the sky in tones of fire and ash. The street lamp at the Taurus flickered off, its light extinguished by the dawn. In that moment I let myself breathe, but my mind raced. What had led this man to trap his own child here? How many nights had she been alone, crying into the darkness? And what else lay hidden on these silent back roads, waiting for the next shift, the next call? The world felt softer now with daylight, but I knew the darkness didn't truly leave. I closed my eyes briefly, the tension coiling beneath my ribs. Then I opened them, ready to face the paperwork, the questions, the follow-up interviews. But in my heart, I carried that flashlight beam, the sudden girl in the crawl space, and the weight of her trembling form. And I knew that for every rescue, there were 100 more cries lost in the dark. I started the engine and drove toward the station, sirens silent now, but my mind echoing with every unanswered question. I killed the engine in front of the juvenile services van and stepped out into the half-light of dawn, boots sinking into soft gravel. The air still carried last night's chill, a bone-deep cold that slips past your uniform and settles under your skin. I watched Diaz guide the little girl inside, her small frame swallowed by the open rear door. He talked to her quietly, soft words, patient, nowhere near the clipped tone I'd used in the crawl space. I turned to the suspect in cuffs, his wrists red and raw. He stared at the ground, tears drying on his cheeks like cracked riverbeds. Dispatch confirmed CPS and paramedics were on scene. Forensic lights were flickering around the convenience store lot, painting everything in harsh blue-white. I let Diaz handle the girl's handoff, walking with the man to my patrol car instead. He trudged along, head bowed, as though afraid to look me in the eye. I kept my distance, professional courtesy, but my chest ached to reach out, grab his shoulder, tell him to explain, to confess, to let me see the pieces bleeding under his skin. I set him in the back seat and slid in beside him. He flinched at the door's click, as if I'd slammed it. My hand hovered over the partition switch before I remembered how useless that plastic barrier felt when versus the real thing. Human desperation. I folded my hands in my lap and kept my voice low. You don't have to say much now. Just answer simple questions. His chin lifted, eyes met mine, shadowed and hollow. Why? I asked. He swallowed, ragged, and I waited, every second an abyss. He cupped his hands like a child begging. I wanted her safe, he rasped. I promised her safe. He shook his head as though fighting a storm inside. They sent them, the men in suits. I heard their voices through the walls. Relief and terror warred in his face, but she was crying. I thought if I hid her, they'd never find her. I nodded slowly, stung by pity and revulsion. Who's coming for her? He looked away. They took her mother. A fit of coughing cut him off, and I pressed the medical button on the radio. Paramedics were still 10 minutes out. I unbuckled my belt cutter, opened the door, and knelt at the edge of the gravel. "Listen, you're hurt. Hold on." He stared at me, confused, as I cut the cuffs, letting his wrists swell back to life. He didn't resist. I guided him out, careful not to let him collapse. "Let me see that cough," I ordered, switching to EMS over my shoulder. I hustled us to the van where Diaz was crouched beside the girl, a medic kneeling to examine her. The man fell to one knee, hands pressed against his chest. The medic checked his vitals and shook his head. "Low blood pressure, dehydration, you need fluids." Diaz looked at me. I nodded, and we loaded him gently into the van's passenger seat. The door closed and the van drove off, its red stripe disappearing down County Road 112. I stood alone as the forensic team swarmed the pump island, fitting evidence markers beside the sedan's driver door, photographing every angle. A detective from Odessa PD approached, Lieutenant Green, a tall man with a creased brow and a voice like gravel. He clasped my shoulder, respectful but firm. "Collins, we need statements. Yours, Diaz's, and the scene here, the house." He gestured to the boarded window of the little girl's home across the road, its curtains drawn. "We'll need warrants, follow-ups, the whole nine." I nodded, tapping my pad. "Already on it." But in my mind, the pieces refused to form a picture. A lone sneaker, an empty car seat, a stolen child, a terrified father. Stitching them together felt like sewing blood into cloth. I looked back at the Taurus under the lamp. Its door still hung open, a silent invitation. I walked over, heart thrumming. The street lamp blinked, as though blinking away a secret. Inside the car, the scent of stale coffee and tobacco clung to upholstery. I ran a gloved finger along the dashboard. No prints, just DNA dissolving into dust. I pulled open the glove box. Inside lay a folded letter, crease-worn sweet with tears. I unfolded it, childish scrawl, pencil smudged. "Daddy, please don't let them take me. I love you." My throat closed. I closed the glove box and pressed both hands to the steering wheel. The real work was just beginning. Each call-out, each scene, was a doorway into someone's nightmare. And once you stepped in, there was no turning back. I trudged back to the van staging area. The sky was coral and gray, the desert's first birds beginning their low, mournful cry. I braced against the hood of my cruiser and stared at the horizon. Somewhere out there were questions only Meredith's mother, wherever she was, could answer. Somewhere out there was a family ripped apart by fear, by voices heard in empty hallways, by a child's whispering plea. And I, just a tired cop in a worn-out uniform, had promised to find them. My phone vibrated. Text from the station. "Suspect has family. Married, 2 kids. Wife's name, Sarah Clark. Address on file in Lubbock PD." I typed back, "Get me everything. Phone records, bank activity, social media. Anything for the past 6 months." My fingers trembled. 6 months of secrets mapped into pixels and logs. Detectives moved in, dragging evidence bags and questioning bystanders. Farmers driving by, the gas station attendant who'd called the alarm in panic, neighbors too afraid to show their faces. I watched as Green and his team tucked forensics into the Taurus. Glove prints, fibers, fragments of the doll's cloth. Each piece of evidence glittered with the promise of answers. but also the weight of truth. Truth that might destroy a fragile, fractured life. I climbed back into my cruiser and powered up the engine. The radio spat out traffic, calls about stray dogs, DUI stops, mundane details that suddenly felt absurd against last night's horrors. I leaned back, clutching the wheel. My ribs ached from yesterday's ruck. My mind replayed Meredith's tear-streaked face. I ran a hand over my stubbled cheek and thought, there are nights you remember forever. I'd wake tomorrow to headline writers and social media whispers, to lawyers and press conferences. But right now, I just needed to drive. To chase leads down dark roads, trusting that if I followed the clues, I'd unravel the tangle of lies and desperation. I eased the car into gear, tires crunching gravel for the last time as I pulled onto County Road 112 and headed east. The sun climbed behind the distant mountains, lancing the sky with pale gold. I thought of Meredith, out there somewhere in someone's backyard, hiding, frightened, waiting for a cop with a flashlight to find her. I thought of her father, grasping hope like a lifeline and finding it frayed at the edges. And I thought of the mother, Sarah, who'd woken this morning to an empty house, a missing daughter and a husband in cuffs. The road ahead was long. My shift had already stretched well past its end, but the work didn't stop. There were interviews to conduct, warrants to draft, searches to plan. And in every break between tasks, I'd hear that crawl space echo. Meredith's tiny sob, the rasp of her father's despair. There was no easy end to nights like this, only the promise of dawn and the dread of returning. I pressed my foot to the pedal, the cruiser's engine purring in answer. Dust curled behind the tires as I drove on, toward Lubbock, toward Leeds, toward whatever dark truths lay waiting in the morning light. The darkness trailed behind me, tethered by a thread of fear, but I drove into sunrise because I couldn't leave it unchallenged. Not after following those footprints into the shadows. Not after making a promise to a frightened child. The miles between Odessa and Lubbock passed under the cruiser's tires in a blur of wind-blown dust and morning sun glinting off highway signs. By the time I turned off onto Sarah Clark's registered address, a tidy, pale blue ranch house on the edge of town, the sky was a washed-out gray, promising heat by midday. My cruiser's engine ticked as it cooled. I killed it and climbed out. Glock secured but hidden under the small of my back, taser at my side. The front yard was neat, trimmed hedges, a row of wind chimes hanging from the porch beam that rattled softly in the breeze. It all looked too normal, too peaceful. I felt the weight of my badge settle deep in my chest as I approached the door. I glanced at the windows, curtains drawn, lights off. No sign of life. No footprints in the small gravel drive beyond my own. I clicked on my flashlight and tapped the glass. Mrs. Clark, Odessa PD, it's safe. Please open up. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon, air freshener masking something stale underneath. I left footprints on the dark hardwood floor as I moved through the living room. Family photos on shelves, smiling faces I didn't know. A toddler's bike helmet perched on a side table. Nothing seemed disturbed. I flicked off the retail-style motion sensor near the ceiling. The sudden hush felt loud. "Sarah," I called softly. No answer. I clicked my pen, ready to jot notes, but I didn't want to break the tension with writing. Instead, I followed the hallway to the kitchen. The cabinets were closed, refrigerator light off. I opened the fridge, a half-empty carton of orange juice, a plate with 3 cold biscuits, a container of leftover mashed potatoes. Nothing out of place. I closed it and checked the drawers. Utensils aligned, dish towels folded. No one here. I noticed a small hand-painted sign on the counter. Home is where your heart is. Beneath it, a framed ultrasound photograph, dated 11 months ago. Meredith's baby sister, I realized, a second child. My mind tightened around the thought. Sarah had 2 children, one missing, one unseen anywhere in the night's call. I snapped a quick photo of the ultrasound with my phone, time-stamped, geotagged. It felt intrusive, but this was evidence. My radio crackled, dispatch asking for an update. I whispered my location and findings, careful to keep my voice soft. No sign of Sarah or the younger child. House appears tidy, no forced entry. I'll secure and wait for search warrant. I switched off the radio and set the phone back in my pocket. I moved into the master bedroom, large, with a 4-poster bed and windows overlooking a fenced backyard. The bedding was rumpled, as if someone had slept here last night. I peeled back the covers. Indentations, but no hair or fibers. My flashlight beam glinted on a dark smudge at the foot of the bed. Mud tracked in, matching the sneaker tread from the Taurus. I crouched, pressing a gloved finger to it, dry now, but unmistakable. A sudden rustling drew my eyes to the open patio door. Curtains fluttered. I approached, heart squeezing. Outside, the back porch light hung broken, swinging on its chain. A child's swing set leaned unused, its chains creaking. I stepped onto the deck, scanning the yard. Nothing. No footprints in the grass, no sign of the younger baby's stroller that I'd earlier seen parked near the shed. The shed door stood ajar. I crept toward it. My flashlight cut a beam into its dark interior. Garden tools, a stack of plastic storage bins, empty paint cans. I swept left. A baby's pink blanket lay folded on top of a box, clean and dry, freshly laundered. But why here? I reached in and lifted it. The fabric was soft, embroidered with the name Meredith in small cursive. My breath caught. Meredith's blanket. Where was she? I snapped a picture and set the blanket aside. I holstered the Glock and retrieved my taser, less lethal if Sarah, or someone, walked out. I called into the shed. Sarah! Meredith, it's Officer Collins. I'm here to help. My own voice startled me in its sharpness. No answer. I backed out and closed the shed door quietly, tagging the handle with evidence tape. The backyard lay empty, still. The swing moved slightly in the breeze, making me imagine a small child's laughter echoing in my head. My pulse raced. I returned to the house and pounded on the windows, hard enough to rattle the frames. "Sarah!" I shouted. "Please, if you're here, open the door." My voice echoed down the hall. Stillness. My radio crackled again, Detective Green calling to see if I'd found anything new. I answered. Sneaker mud in master bedroom. Baby's blanket found in shed. No sign of occupants. He responded calmly. "I'll bring the warrant. In the meantime, get forensics on the mud smudge, blanket, door handles. Secure the scene." I clicked off the radio and sank onto the couch, leaning forward, hands clasped. The house felt alive and dead all at once. Like someone had only just left but might return at any moment, or like it could swallow me whole in an instant. I considered calling for K9, but time was critical. Meredith was out there somewhere, alone. I stood and began a methodical sweep. Windows sealed with tape. Exterior lights turned on to flood the yard. I left a sign on the front door. "Do not enter. Odessa PD warrant pending." With that, I retreated to the cruiser to await Green. I realized the pattern. Someone, or something, wanted to leave breadcrumbs to tempt me. Was Sarah orchestrating this? Was another player involved? A confession of delusion from Daniel seemed unlikely. He was too broken, too sincere in his terror. Yet here, at her own home, nothing made sense. Detective Green arrived, warrant in hand. blanked by 2 uniform officers. He laid out the document, signed by the county judge, allowing search of the house and property, interviews, seizure of evidence. He thanked me for securing the scene. I nodded and led him inside. As he and the team spread out, dusting for prints on the nursery dresser, photographing the bed smudge, bagging the blanket, I lingered by the hallway mirror. I stared at my reflection. Hollow eyes above a square jaw, uniform crisp but disheveled. I imagined Sarah and her youngest clutching each other in terror, maybe hiding in a closet, listening as I knocked. The thought made my chest tighten. From the living room, I heard Green's voice. "Collins, look at this." He held up a family photograph, a Christmas snapshot featuring Sarah, Daniel, little Meredith, and the new baby, bundled in scarves and hats. They all smiled, frozen in time. Green noticed my gaze. "See that? Someone placed this intentionally. But look closer." He pointed at the corner of the frame, a dark smear, almost like a finger smudge on the glass. Next to it, scrawled in small, neat letters, "Find me." My breath caught. I leaned in and traced the writing, ink still fresh. Not a note in the household, not an afterthought, a taunt, a plea, a challenge. The phrase reverberated through the silent house. Someone wanted to be found. Someone wanted the fear to simmer just beneath the skin. Green met my eyes. "You think Sarah wrote it? Or Daniel?" He cocked his head. I shook mine. "Doesn't feel like either of them. Sarah's handwriting's cursive, rounded. Daniel's shaky all over the place. This is precise, almost mechanical." A soft chirp of a phone alert made us both jump. I checked mine, a text from dispatch. K, 9 unit diverted to another call. Unavailable for at least 2 hours. No dogs. In the silence that followed, I realized we were on our own. 2 officers, a house full of questions, no clear suspect, and 2 missing children at risk. I stepped away from the photo and toward the hallway, flashlight cutting a path. The beam landed on the nursery door, white with pastel decals. I reached for the knob. It was locked. I clicked my pen and the tension coiled inside me. Whoever hid behind this door was counting on time. Time before warrant, time before discovery, time before help. I radioed Green. "Break this lock." He pocketed his pen and drew a small pry bar. "On it." As he worked, I glanced at the window beyond the crib, closed, shutters latched. My gut screamed that something small and terrified was inside, waiting. The lock gave with a snap. Green pushed the door open, and the nursery light burst into view. Walls painted soft yellow, mobile hanging above an empty crib. Tiny clothes carefully folded in the dresser. A rocking chair sat in the corner, its cushion plump and clean. No sign of struggle. Then, on the floor by the window, I saw footprints, bare, small, trailing toward the closet door. Closet door cracked. I raised my flashlight. No one inside, but taped to the inside of the door was a single Polaroid. Meredith standing alone in a dark field, eyes wide, hands raised as if reaching. On the back, scrawled in the same precise script, "Almost free." My heart slammed. I felt the world tilt, the walls closing in. "This isn't just a trace," I muttered, voice raw. "It's a message." Green's flashlight settled on the Polaroid as I slipped a glove on. The letters gleamed in the beam. "Almost free." My mind raced. Free from what? From fear? From this house? Or free to disappear again? I pocketed the photograph carefully, sealing evidence. No answers. Only more questions. Questions threading through my mind like barbed wire. I realized then the darkness wasn't behind me anymore. It was inside these walls, shaping the story, writing the script, and I was just the actor called to play the part of rescuer. I paused in the doorway and let the scene sink in. An immaculate nursery violated only by smudges and taunts. A family portrait marked with a challenge. Footprints leading to empty space. I whispered a vow I couldn't hear. I'd find them. Both girls. Sarah and Daniel, too, if it came to that. Anyone who'd brought this horror into the daylight. But as I turned, the closet door creaked shut on its own. Soft, deliberate. I froze, every muscle taut. I clicked the flashlight back on, empty hallway, no wind to push the door, no one in sight. Just me, standing in the silent house, haunted by a message in a frame and a photograph in a closet. My flashlight beam trembled as I stood in the threshold of that nursery. Walls yellow and serene, disturbed only by the footprints that led to nothing. The closet door had clicked shut behind me without a gust of wind, as if someone, or something, had slipped away at the very moment I looked away. I swallowed, voice caught in my throat. I kept my light trained on the empty closet, every shadow quivering. I stepped forward, the floorboards creaking under my boots. The rug by the crib was plush, and I knelt, running a gloved finger along the edge. More smudges, little crescent arcs of dirt. Whoever had moved through here had taken care to leave those marks, almost like a map. I tilted my head, following the arcs down the hall toward the front door. My heart pounded so loudly I could almost hear it in my ears. I stood and followed, each step measured, taser raised. I passed the dresser where forensics dusted for prints, leaving me the only uniformed officer free to move. Green lingered near the broken wind chimes by the front door, writing in his notebook. I caught his eye and motioned. He nodded, cautious. We both knew not to crowd each other. Too many bodies in a confined space makes evidence dance. I swept the hallway in a slow arc. The living room looked empty, curtains drawn despite the dawn light pressing through. I clicked the hall light on, the overhead bulb humming, throwing the whole floor into sharp relief. No footprints on the hardwood except mine, and none on the carpet runner leading to the kitchen. I checked the mud smudge at the threshold, nothing new. I realized whoever had moved through here was long gone. I holstered the taser and patted my vest. My Glock was still there, a cold reassurance against my hip. I should have brought backup inside, but I'd wanted a quick, quiet search. No need to scare Sarah's neighbors with a SWAT team raiding her home. But now, in this silence, I wondered if that decision would haunt me. I rejoined Green by the front window. He held up a small evidence bag containing a scrap of the pink blanket we'd found in the shed. "Matches thread on the doll," he said, voice low. "No prints yet, but the fibers are clean cuts, like someone snipped them with scissors." He exhaled. "You think she left it there herself to lure you?" I nodded slowly. "Feels staged." My gaze drifted to the street beyond the open front door. Quiet cul-de-sac, flower beds neat, mailboxes empty. A neighbor's dog barked blocks away. The world carried on as though nothing terrible had happened here. I glanced back at the nursery sign. "Home is where your heart is." Bitter irony. I took a deep breath. "We need to widen the search." Green agreed. He radioed dispatch. Bolo on foot traffic in the area, pedestrians, cyclists, anyone matching suspect's description moving eastbound. He turned to me. "I'm going to station. Bring me anything else you find here." He swept out of the house like a shadow, and I watched until he and the others piled into unmarked cars and drove off, sirens silent. I was alone again, and that silence pressed into me. I closed the front door and locked it behind me, then pocketed my keys. I walked to the passenger side of my cruiser, settling onto the hood. The engine's heat warmed my backside. I brought my knees to my chest and stared at the house's facade. Windows like eyes, dark and inscrutable. I reached into my pocket for my phone. No new messages. No sign that Sarah or Meredith had attempted contact. I dialed the missing children hotline number I'd been given earlier, silent, controlled. When the operator answered, I gave a brief report. Updated description of Daniel Clark, Sarah's name, corroboration of Meredith's recovery, but not yet returned home. I requested they update Amber Alerts and social media blasts. The operator said it was done. I hung up. The cruiser's radio crackled. "Officer Collins?" It was Diaz's voice. I clicked the mic. "Go ahead," he said. "We got a hit on security cameras from the convenience store. Looks like 2 silhouettes, one child-sized, one adult, moving northbound on County Road 112 at 1:45 a.m. Both head covered, face obscured." His tone was tentative, as though he feared the answer more than the question. I swallowed. "Any chance to zoom or capture gate, build?" He paused. "Silhouettes only, but the child looks to be wearing that pink jacket from the Polaroid. The adult's jacket matches the one in the Taurus." My chest tightened. The timeline was narrower than I thought. "Copy. Send coordinates." I clicked off and keyed the mic again. "Boil down the area northbound." "I'll drive the route." I swung my legs off the hood, landing in a roll that saved my back. My boots hit the pavement. I popped the cruiser door open, slid in, and fired the engine. The gauges flickered, then steadied. I eased down the driveway, turning east onto County Road 112, visuals scanning for anything unusual. The sun climbed higher, stripping shadows from the landscape. Those silhouettes moved in darkness, their path now laid bare under daylight. I drove slowly, windows down, radio silence. Gravel sprayed behind the tires as I followed the path indicated by the footage. First, the little convenience store, then a half-mile north to a crossroads marked by a lone billboard advertising roadside barbecue. I parked beside the sign. It blocked a view of a dirt lane running west. I killed the engine and climbed out. Flashlight in hand, now useless in daylight, but I kept it. I'd grown used to its weight in my grip. I cupped my hand over my eyes, peering into the lane. Sparse mesquite grew along the edge, and hoof prints marked the soft soil. Small tracks that could be horse or big dog. No human prints at first glance, but if they'd passed long ago, rain or breeze could have erased them. I bent and found a shallow indentation still moist, fresh. 2 prints. One adult shoe, one bare footprint, small. I snapped a photo. My radio chimed. Green to Collins. I'm getting warrants for Sarah's phone data. We have ping on her cell that places it in Midland, off loop 250, around 2:15 a.m. That's an hour after the convenience store video. He sounded exhausted. She, or someone, moved southbound from here. Meridian Barbecue Road to loop 250. I'm meeting the cyber unit at the station, then heading out to Midland Morgue to check for unidentified female prints. See if her phone got swapped. I ran a hand through my hair. The pieces drifted further apart, not closer. I responded, "Copy that. I'm tracking the same route, following where the video silhouettes go north, then figuring intersect with her phone ping route." He said, "Be careful out there." I clicked off. I returned to the cruiser, engine already idling. I pulled out onto the dirt lane, following it east until it met a deserted frontage road. The pavement shimmered in the heat. I got back on County Road 112 North, then merged onto Interstate 20 East, heading toward Loop 250. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, knuckles white, like I was driving for my life. Everything felt urgent, the roar of tires on asphalt, the weight of each breath. Halfway to Midland, a dispatch alert crackled. Officer Collins, we have an unresponsive female at a private residence off Loop 250. Paramedics responding with Code 3. My stomach dropped. Could be Sarah. Maybe they found her passed out. Or could be someone else. I flicked the siren on and the lights. The cruiser lunged forward, swallowing miles in minutes. I arrived at a single-story brick house with a covered porch sagging. The paramedics were kneeling beside a woman slumped on the front steps, pale as ashes, eyes fluttering. A man in a polo shirt hovered, wringing his hands. I pulled up, killed the lights, and rushed to the woman. "ODPD, let me through." I pushed past an EMT and knelt. She was conscious but groggy, eyes half open, her breathing shallow. I checked her pulse, rapid but weak, skin clammy. Hydration, possible assault, flashed in my mind. The man introduced himself as Brian Ellis, neighbor. "She came staggering down my driveway," he said, voice shaking, screaming for help, saying her baby was gone. Then she collapsed. I scanned the house. Lights on inside, front door ajar. He pointed there. I saw footprints muddied, leading to my garage. My gut screamed. I needed to know if this woman was Sarah Clark. I asked her name. She whispered, "Sarah Clark." Her eyes locked on mine, full of fear. Relief and dread warred in me. I radioed Green. "We have Sarah Clark, alive but unconscious. She's been somewhere dangerous." Green responded, "Copy. I'm diverting. Get statement when possible and bring her in." I barked orders to paramedics. Transport her to Odessa Medical for evaluation. I handed Ellis my phone for his contact information. He nodded and stayed. As they loaded Sarah onto the gurney, she reached out, gripping my arm. "Find her," she rasped. "Meredith." My throat closed. "I will," I said, voice firm. I stepped aside as they left, sirens fading. I approached the house, flashlight cuffed to my belt. The front door's threshold was smeared with dried mud, same tire tread and sneaker pattern. I shone my light inside. Muddy footprints marched down the hallway, splashes on the kitchen tiles. I followed, careful not to step in their wake, to the garage door. The automatic opener had scratched the ceiling. The door was half hoisted, chain dangling. I squeezed through. The garage was cluttered with boxes and an old sedan covered by a tarp. I yanked the tarp free. Another Ford Taurus, newer model, license plates removed. I flicked my light across a dusty rear seat, a child's car seat, identical to the first, but snapped shut and empty. My pulse thundered. Then I noticed the whiteboard affixed to the wall, scrawled in marker, "One left, don't fail me." Beneath that, a crudely drawn map of the county, X's marking the convenience store, the crawlspace house, Sarah's home, and a final X in the southeast quadrant, almost within reach of Loop 250. I took a breath, turning my face toward the open garage door's glare. The map's last mark glowed under my flashlight, a promise of where Meredith might be hidden again. My phone buzzed. Green. "Sarah's awake, calling for you." I pocketed the device and hustled back toward the steps, just as Sarah's gurney rolled under the porch light. She smiled wanly and whispered, "Thank you." I nodded, voice tight. "We're not done yet, I'm coming." I returned inside the garage and tore the map from the wall, stuffing it into an evidence bag. My reflection stared back at me in the Taurus's rearview mirror, ragged, determined. I shut the garage door and locked it behind me, breathing in and out as though sucking oxygen through a straw. Outside, the morning sun beat down, hot enough to set the skin on my neck to burning. Dust motes danced in the light, swirling around the cruiser. I climbed in, map on the passenger seat, and flicked on the GPS. Southeast quadrant, rural backroads, empty fields, a derelict feed store north of Midland. The same place I'd checked months ago on another call. My stomach twisted. I punched in the location. As I pulled away, my radio chimed with Green's voice. "Be careful, Collins. This one's a trap." I exhaled, gripping the wheel. "Copy that," I replied. "But it's where she needs to be found." I clicked off and accelerated toward the feed store, headlights carving through the heat haze. The darkness of last night had given way to blistering daylight, but the real darkness waited ahead. Layers of fear and desperation buried beneath dirt roads and barbed wire. And I was the one who'd promised to keep going, no matter how deep into the shadows I had to drive. I eased off the accelerator as the feed store's weathered sign came into view. Peeling red letters spelling Jackson's Feeds and Supplies, jutting crooked over a gravel driveway littered with old tires and broken pallets. The building itself leaned to one side, its wooden siding gray with age and sun. A solitary window, cracked and filthy, reflected the afternoon sun in a blinding glare. Rusted grain silos stood sentinel behind it, their metal ribs pitted and corroded. Everything felt suspended in time, like someone had abandoned this place years ago, leaving only echoes. My radio crackled with Detective Green's voice, calm but urgent. "Collins, we've got your coordinates. North side of the building, west door. Witness reports marked footprints leading into a fenced-in corral. Dogs might have been here once, chains gone slack. Approach with caution." I clicked off, heart thudding. I checked my flashlight and sidearm, then killed the engine and stepped out, the heat rippling in waves off the ground. Gravel crunched under my boots as I walked the perimeter. The west door was wooden, heavy, with a broken latch still hanging by one hinge. Muddy footprints, one adult, one small bare print, marred the threshold. I inhaled, the stench of old grain and animal feed filling my nostrils. I swept my flashlight inside, darkness. I slid my hand to the pistol grip, took a deep breath, and nudged the door open. Inside, the air was thick and still. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the boards, casting slanted stripes across rusted tools and stacks of burlap sacks. I could almost feel the dust motes drifting, idle in this beam. I stepped in, flashlight tracing piles of rodent-chewed packaging and a toppled wheelbarrow. Across the back wall, a faded poster advertised premium horse mix, fortified for strength. The irony struck me. Strength needed now, but none left for a lost child. I moved forward, every sense alert. Footprints continued beyond an old office partition with shattered glass. Tiny, bare impressions beside a scuffed boot print. My breath caught. Meredith must have walked here, frightened, maybe calling out. I followed the trail to a trap door concealed beneath a torn tarp. The edges of the door were scratched, splinters fresh. I clicked my radio. Trap door in feed store interior. Possible entry to basement. No response. Units were stretched thin. I braced my shoulder and pushed the tarp aside, then heaved the trap door open. A faint groan of hinges met my ears. Below lay a narrow stairwell, each tread coated in dust mixed with mud. I flicked the flashlight down the steps. The beam wavered on a rough-hewn stone floor. I slipped onto the first stair, then the next, until I stood in a low-ceilinged tunnel. The smell here was worse. Damp earth, stale rot, and something else metallic, like blood. My heart pounded in the hush. I clicked the light along the tunnel walls, exposed brick half covered in moss and webs. At the far end, a dim opening led to a larger space. The footprints continued, leading into that darkness. I tightened my grip, exhaled, and moved forward, each footstep echoing. After 10 yards, the tunnel opened into a cavernous room. Old feed bins lined one wall, barrels lay on their sides, contents long spoiled. In the center stood a makeshift cot, blanket stained and rumpled. Next to it, debris, a single sneaker, size 5, matching the one in the trunk, and a child's t-shirt, filthy but unmistakable. My throat closed. I swept the room, flashlight knife-like. A thin beam picked out a small backpack slung over a barrel, straps frayed. I moved in, heart racing, and unzipped it. Empty except for a pink ribbon and a folded drawing. Crayon sketch of a smiling family. Meredith, mother, father, and beneath it, a jagged lightning bolt drawn in dark blue. No message, but everything here was a message. I holstered my taser, careful not to damage evidence, and radioed Green. I'm in subterranean feed room. Found Meredith's sneaker and shirt, empty backpack, drawing. No sign of child. Suspect may have fled through north exit. He replied, "Copy. We're setting up perimeter. Can you find other exits?" I scanned the walls. On the far side, what looked like a bricked-up window, partial archway sealed with cinder blocks. One corner loosened. I kicked at the loose bricks. They tumbled with a thud. Behind them was a narrow shaft, cracked stone steps leading upward. I knelt, shining the light, daylight glinting through the opening. That was my exit. I scrambled up, pulling bricks aside until I could squeeze through the gap. My shirt snagged, ripping at the shoulder, but adrenaline carried me. I emerged outside under a bony mesquite tree, midday sun stabbing into my eyes. The corral fence lay just ahead, rusted wire twisted around weathered posts. I crossed the dry dirt toward the fence, scanning the barren lot. Footprints led through the gate into the parched pasture beyond, tracking eastward. I followed, moving fast. The ground here was cracked clay. Sparse grass clung to tufts, and tumbleweeds dotted the horizon. A barbed wire fence lined the field's edge, and beyond it ran the old railroad spur, unused tracks half buried in sand. The footprints ended at the tracks, adult and child side by side, then only adult. Meredith's footprints stopped at the rail. I knelt, heart jagged, and found tiny imprints pressed into the dirt. Toes splayed, like someone had slipped out of shoes to move quietly. Then only adult boots continuing. I stood, sun beating down, anxiety climbing like poison in my veins. My radio crackled. "Collins? Any sign?" I fought to keep my voice steady. Tracks end at the rail. No sign of her beyond here. Suspect moved on alone. Silence. Then Green. "We're planting K9 units at station. They'll head out to tracks." Relief and dread swirled. I watched the horizon, dust drifting. Somewhere out there was a frightened child barefoot, exhausted, while her captor raced toward some final rendezvous. I pulled out my phone and dialed dispatch. "Get medical and search team to the tracks. Prepare a search eastward for a lost child, potentially injured, dehydrated." The dispatcher confirmed. I clicked off and turned back to the field. I had to keep moving. I jogged ahead, binoculars in hand, scanning the scrub. Each mesa and hillock held shadows that could hide a small figure. I forced my eyes to adjust to the heat haze, heart aching with every passing second. 20 minutes later, the shrill bark of a tracking dog cut through the silence. Unit Delta approaching. I waved the officer over. He released the Labrador, and it plunged into the brush, nose to ground. I watched the dog vanish around a clump of mesquite. Moments later, it barked once, then twice, indicating positive track. My legs tensed. I followed, boots sliding on gravel and dirt, until the dog stopped at a shallow wash. There, by a tumbleweed uprooted by wind, lay a frayed doll's head, plastic, cracked, one eye missing. The dog nosed it gently. I crouched, stomach lurching. That doll had belonged to Meredith. I reached the small wash, water-stained and dry, packed the sandbanks on either side. No tracks here. The dog whimpered and stared at me. I knelt, running a finger across the doll's face. Soft plastic grooves. I felt tears burn at my eyes, anger and sorrow twisting me inside. I radioed Green. We have doll in wash, likely dropped in flight, but no human tracks beyond here, must be washed away or covered. He came through, voice grim. Hang tight. We're sending ground teams by ATV. I exhaled, rising. The sun dipped low in the sky, turning dust pink and orange. Shadows grew long. Chill crept into the air. I turned my back on the wash and peered eastward, toward where the tracks vanished and the scrubland stretched infinite. The fields looked peaceful, empty, but I knew better. Somewhere in that vast nothing was a child's breath, a heartbeat barely audible. Somewhere was a man's frantic hurry, a trap still alive. And somewhere was the truth, darting ahead like a phantom I'd almost grasped, only to have it slip through my fingers. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, the world ringing with wind and distant dog barks. I opened them and stepped back, crunching dry grass underfoot. I would follow every lead, chase every footprint, no matter how faint. Because if I stopped, even for a second, Meredith Clark might vanish again into the dust. I drew my taser, not knowing what I'd find, but ready to face it. My radio crackled. Collins, sunset in 30 minutes. Agents staging at the bridge over the Pecos River. Possible crossing point, over. I flicked on my mic. I'll be there in 10. I turned, walking back the way I came, leaving the feed store and tracks behind, heading toward the river and another piece of this broken puzzle. The sun glowed low, burning the horizon. The world tilted between day and dark, and I felt the weight of silence settling over the land. Somewhere ahead was a crossing, a riverbank, and maybe, just maybe, a child lost but not yet gone. I pressed on, footsteps echoing, determined to pierce the gathering shadows. Because you don't let a 7-year-old vanish into thin air. You don't let darkness claim her. And you damn well don't stop driving until you bring her home. And so I walked on, the railroad spur behind me, the river calling ahead, heat and dust etched into my uniform. My throat felt raw, my limbs heavy, but I didn't slow. Not now, not when the final moment of dread hovered on the horizon, where the land met the sky, waiting to swallow the unwary whole. I stepped into the fading light, knowing I carried her fate in my hands, and that once I reached the river, the truth would reveal itself in the water's reflection or in the absence of sound. The world held its breath with me, and I moved forward into the gloaming, ready to uncover the last secret that lurked beyond the feed store's stones. The sun was a dying ember on the western horizon when I finally rolled to a stop at the Pecos River Bridge. The old steel structure groaned under my cruiser's weight, its paint blistered and rusted, where generations of water and wind had eaten away at it. Below, the river ran slow and dark, its surface glassy in the dim light, hiding depths I didn't want to think about. Yet here, at this ancient crossing, voices of possibility whispered on the breeze. Meredith Clark might be anywhere, but if she'd followed her captor this far, the river would be his only way forward. I cut the engine and eased out, letting the cruiser coast to a halt. Boots crunching on gravel, I approached the guardrail. I leaned over, the cool metal biting into my palms as I flicked on my flashlight. The beam pierced the dusky air, revealing a narrow path worn into the bank, where the earth gave way to mud. Footprints, one adult, one child, imprinted in the damp sand. The child's toes splayed innocently, but the adult's heel print was an accusation. I exhaled, tasting the river's faint musk mixed with dust. This was the line between somewhere she might have hidden and somewhere she could vanish forever. I radioed for the dive team. Submerged units. Possible sighting of footprints leading into the river just north of the bridge. The response crackled back. 10-4, ETA 20 minutes. I toggled the mic off and crouched beside the prince. The adult track angled upstream, toward an old irrigation canal offshoot that split from the river's main current. It would provide a calmer channel for a lone person and a small child to follow without being swept away. I shone the beam upstream, scanning for anything. A discarded shoe, a scrap of clothing, a handprint smeared on the water's edge. My light settled on something. Just a glint of pink against the gray sand. I bent and picked it up, the edge of the pink ribbon from Meredith's backpack. The fibers were wet, clinging together in salt and river grit. My radio buzzed. Dive team on location. West bank, 10 yards downstream. Relief and urgency jostled inside me. I stood and followed the riverbank on foot, keeping low under the bridge's steel girders. The dive team's red hats bobbed in the half-light, flashlights flickering underwater. I watched as one of them surfaced, goggles in hand, eyes deadly calm. He pointed upriver. I joined him at the water's edge. He pulled me aside. We found a shallow depression. Looks like someone crouched there. No body, but the water is murky. We'll need sonar. He tapped the water. No sign yet. I nodded and scanned the surface. Eddies and ripples, but nothing solid. My gut flared. Fear and adrenaline distilled into a single pulse. I thanked him and moved back to the footprints. They led me up the bank and toward the old canal's mouth. A crumbling sluice gate that no one had used in decades. The wooden planks were splintered and half submerged. I climbed onto the gate, careful not to spray water, and peered inside. Black water pooled beneath broken beams, reflecting a burnt orange sky. No footprints, no sign of a body. Only the silent promise of hidden currents. I tapped my radio. Divers check canal entrance. I'm going to follow the bank westward. The sun sank lower, leaving an afterimage of blood on the horizon. I found a metal footbridge spanning the canal a few yards upriver. Rusted grate decking squeaking under each step. I crossed, heart hammering, and landed on the far bank, which gave way to thick reeds and cattails. The ground was soft, a sponge of mud that sucked at my boots. I slogged through, flashlight beam wavering, adrenaline lending strength to my legs. 10 yards of reeds later, the marsh thinned into a scrub pasture dotted with mesquite. I caught sight of footprints again, bare and small, paired with adult boots. The prints headed into a grove of tamarisk, gnarled, twisted trees that clawed at the sky. I hesitated at the grove's edge, inhaling a ragged breath. A child could hide here and vanish in an instant, but I steeled myself and stepped in, flashlight carving through the gloom. Inside the grove, the air was still, a pocket of silence broken only by the rustle of dry leaves. I advanced slowly, moving from tree to tree, scanning for movement. The ground was littered with twigs and broken branches. No fresh disturbance, no footprints. It was as though the earth itself had swallowed the tracks. My pulse thundered in my ears. I forced my shoulders back, pressing onward until I reached the grove's center. A clearing wide enough for a child to sit without being seen from the road. I shone the light across the open ground. My beam caught on something pale. A crumpled sweatshirt half buried in the sand, mottled with dirt and wet. I knelt and unfolded it. Pink, with a small stain near the hem. Meredith's sweatshirt. My throat closed as I stared at that fabric, once soft and warm, now soggy and abandoned. I pressed it to my face, smelling cotton and fear. She had been here. She had sat or knelt here, calling out, and then she wasn't here anymore. A twig snapped behind me. I spun, pistol raised, light swinging across trunks and shadows. Nothing moved, only the choking quiet of the grove. I kept the light trained on the clearing, breathing slow, praying the next heartbeat wouldn't be the last. I called out, voice shaking, "Meredith." "It's Officer Collins. I'm here to take you home." The silence answered. I scanned the perimeter, trees thickening, no exit except the path I'd taken. I radioed Green. "I'm in the tamarisk grove at the old canal. Found sweatshirt, no sign of child. Requesting thermal drone support," he replied. "Copy. ETA 5 minutes. Hang tight." I exhaled and holstered the pistol. I crouched beside the sweatshirt, lifting it gently. My blood pounded so loud it drowned out my thoughts. Meredith had been here. She'd been so close to rescue. But now she was gone again, swallowed by the marsh. Then, just as I lifted the sweatshirt and pressed it against my chest, I heard it. A soft, high whimper, barely audible over the wind. My heart seized. I stood, spinning toward the sound, light slashing through branches. Whimper again, straight ahead, beyond a cluster of tamarisk. I moved, each step careful so as not to stir the dead leaves. My radio buzzed with static. "Officer Collins?" I clicked the mic. "Copy. I'm moving toward a sound." The whimper came again. An uneven rhythm, like a child half crying, half calling. I followed it to a thicket bristling with thorny vines. They snagged my uniform as I pushed through, tearing my shirt at the shoulder. Then, at the thicket's heart, I saw her. Small silhouette curled behind a trunk, limbs drawn tight, head bowed. Meredith, filthy, shaken, tears streaking her face. Relief surged, almost knocking me off my feet. I holstered the pistol and dropped to one knee, flashlight in hand. "Meredith?" My voice was a whisper and a roar at once. She looked up, eyes wide, hollowed by hours in the dark. Her lips parted in a sob. I reached out, hand trembling, and gently brushed a strand of matted hair from her forehead. She flinched, buried her face in my chest, crying, quiet and ragged. I wrapped her in my arms, holding her tight as the grove seemed to collapse around us. After what felt like an eternity, her tears slowed, her breathing eased. I pulled back and wiped her cheeks, scanning her for injuries, none visible, thank God, just dirt and fear. I radioed Green. "I have Meredith. She's okay, just shaken. I'm extracting." He replied, voice quavering with relief. "I'm on the way." I scooped her into my arms, careful of her thin frame, and backed out of the thicket. Every step I took felt light, as though gravity had eased with her rescue. But as I emerged from the grove, a chill washed over me. The sky above was bruised purple and black, night closing in faster than expected. And though I carried Meredith toward the light, the edges of darkness crept in behind us. By the time Green's cruiser arrived, siren silent, the clearing was empty again. No footprints, no evidence, only the faint echo of our passing. I settled Meredith into the back seat, buckling her in gently, and knelt beside her window. "You're safe now," I whispered, voice thick. She nodded, eyes heavy, and clung to the sweatshirt I'd found. Green climbed in beside me. "We'll get her home," he said. I nodded, but my gaze drifted to the grove's edge. The tamarisk thicket stood like silent witnesses, branches intertwined, shadows swallowing their secrets. I wanted to believe we'd found every trace, rescued every soul. But as the cruiser pulled away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night had one more surprise tucked in its sleeve. Because somewhere, in the empty spaces between footprints, and in the hush that follows a child's whimper, there are secrets the darkness keeps for itself. And though I'd brought her out of that grove, though I'd carried her to safety, the shadows lingered, crawling over the land like a thirsty creature, thirsting not for bodies, but for the hush that follows their footsteps. I watched the road ahead through the windshield. The streetlights blurred into orange halos, and I realized the night would end soon, but the darkness wouldn't. It would keep its vigil long after Meredith was safe in her mother's arms and the criminals were locked away. It would wait for the next cry in the dark, the next lone officer answering a call, the next lost soul swallowed by silence. And in that knowledge, I felt both weary and resolved. I whispered to myself, as much a vow as a confession, no more hiding, no more shadows. I'll keep driving into the dark. I glanced back at Meredith, her head resting against the seat, breathing even now. Relief wrenched me, but as I turned forward again, the road before me stretched into blackness, illuminated only by a lone beam of headlights. The night lay ahead, vast and implacable, and I, a tired, scarred cop, stared into its depths, ready to face whatever waited there. I eased the cruiser onto the highway, headlights cutting through the gathering gloom as the world narrowed to toothpaste white lines on black asphalt. Meredith sat in the back seat, asleep at last, blanket pulled tight under her chin, a fragile life cradled in the chill of the cabin air. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Her chest rose and fell with tentative regularity, eyelashes dark against pale skin. For a moment, relief washed over me so fierce it nearly cracked my sternum. Then guilt and exhaustion rolled in behind it, a reminder that this rescue was only one chapter in a book that might never close. I flicked the blinker and exited toward the hospital bay. The neon emergency sign flickered like a dying firefly, painting the white walls in pulsing red. I parked, shut down the engine, and climbed out, boots echoing across concrete. 2 nurses emerged, guided Meredith's gurney into the sterile hallway. I followed, keeping pace without crowding, protocol and courtesy fused in equal measure. They led her inside, disappearing around a corner. I held my breath until a doctor reappeared, offering a thumbs up. She's stable, minor dehydration, shock, will want to see her parents soon. I nodded, voice swallowed by the sterile hush. Back outside, the cruiser sat under a lone spotlight. I ran a hand through my hair, already damp with sweat and river grit. I dialed dispatch. Case status: Meredith Clark safe, en route to room 14. Suspect in custody, search ongoing. The dispatcher's click of acknowledgement felt miles away. I snapped the radio closed and let the night press against me. I walked to the back of the station, hoping for coffee or a cot. The bullpen was empty, overhead fluorescents buzzing. My report waited on the captain's desk. Statement, evidence logs, witness interviews. I grabbed the folder and sank into a chair, opening the file on Sarah Clark. I reread her statements, frantic, disjointed, yet coherent in terror. They painted a portrait of a mother driven to desperation, haunted by voices and shadows. But now she was in the hospital, and whether those voices were real or hallucinated mattered less than the damage they'd wrought. I summoned the desk officer. "I'm heading out to finish the perimeter sweep," I said. He nodded, yawning. "Everything else is locked down, forensics wrapped at the feed store, dog teams out on the tracks." I rubbed my jaw. "I'll run the crime scene one more time, then I'm done." He handed me a mug of coffee, black, bitter, and I walked back out into the night. The wind had picked up, carrying desert chill down Main Street. I drove the short distance to the feed store again, the one place that had swallowed and spitted out every clue I'd chased. Metal and wood groaned in the breeze as I stepped onto the uneven porch. I clicked my flashlight on, beam slicing shadows into neat rectangles. The cellar hatch, now secured with new bolts by forensics, looked incongruous, too pristine against the grime. I ran my gloved hand over the cold metal, remembering the terror that had dripped from those stone steps. The echo of Meredith's tiny sobs still thrummed in my ears. I circled inside, passing overturned carts, rotted implements, and the trapdoor lofted above me. Each piece of evidence felt embalmed in the building's memory. I paused at the windowless office where the map had hung, its X's and taunts peeled away, leaving only ghost glue. I rubbed my thumb over the bare spot on the wood paneling, as though I could feel the imprint of ink beneath. I thought of the note. One left, don't fail me. The words had burned their way into my mind, a promise or a curse. But now, with Meredith safe, they rang hollow, but no less ominous. I switched off the flashlight and let darkness swallow me. In that pitch-black hush, I imagined footprints reappearing on the floor, adult, child, and the trapdoor creaking open. I pictured a small face at the edge of the beam, eyes wide with terror. I inhaled, wanting to tell myself it was over, that there were no more children in need, no more shadows stalking the open spaces. But I couldn't lie to myself. The groaning timbers felt alive, as though the building itself waited for the next soul brave or foolish enough to enter. I backed out the front door, stepping onto gravel that crunched like bones. My boots left fresh prints in the moonlit dust, and I followed them to the cruiser, headlights catching a single glove lying in the lot. Ornate stitching, pink ribbon looped through the wrist. I bent down, picking it up. Child-sized, matching the one I'd rescued. I shook my head. How had this been missed? Had it dropped off Meredith as she climbed the steps, or was it planted, one last breadcrumb? I slipped it into an evidence bag. The night air bit at my face as I sealed it, the cold reminder that darkness held tight to its secrets. As I climbed in, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Clark, sent from the hospital. Thank you. I know you saved her. God bless you. I stared at the words, typed in her shaky script, feeling both warmth and an ache I couldn't place. I wanted to promise her peace, closure, safety, but I knew better. Peace is elusive in our line of work. Closure can be snatched away by a single misplaced footprint. I started the engine and pulled away, the silhouette of Jackson's feeds and supplies receding in my taillights. The highway stretched before me, straight and inviting, but I wasn't headed home. Not yet. There were still interviews, Sarah's debrief, evidence handoffs, court filings. There were reports to finalize, witnesses to support, a community to reassure. But most of all, there was the knowledge that this night, this case, would carve grooves into me that no coffee or paperwork could smooth out. I merged onto the highway, the hum of the tires a lullaby for the weary. I thought of Meredith's sleeping form in room 14, dreaming, or maybe just resting for the nightmares to start. I thought of her father, lost in his own delusions, wrecked by fear. I thought of Sarah, broken and hopeful in her hospital bed. And I thought of the handcuffed man, questioning faces in an interrogation room, seeing ghosts in every shadow. The miles droned by, mile markers clicking off in dull succession. My mind wandered to my own daughter, safe at home, blissfully unaware of the night's horrors. A pang tore through me. I would see her tomorrow, wrap her in my arms, tell her bedtime stories with nothing darker than a distant thunderstorm. But for now, the highway beckoned, and I answered, because the dark has a long reach. It trails you home, skitters across the walls, rattles the blinds at 2 a.m. I eased onto the final exit, lights of the city flickering like embers. The world slept, save for a few night owls and graveyard shift keepers like me. As I turned toward the station, the dashboard clock glowed 3:14 a.m. I exhaled. Relief and dread mingled in my lungs. The night was nearly over, but as I stepped out of the cruiser, I knew the darkness would never truly leave me. It would lie in wait in every hush, every flicker of a street lamp, every silent stretch of road. I locked the cruiser and walked toward the station doors. My footsteps sounded hollow. Alone. I paused under the buzzing light at the entrance, peering into the shadowed glass. My reflection stared back, eyes ringed and haunted, uniform sagging. I whispered to my reflection, a vow or confession. I wasn't sure which. I'll keep driving into the dark. Then I pushed open the door and stepped inside, leaving behind the night's final footprints. But the darkness followed, like a patient hunter, slipping in the door after me. And in the hush of the station, I felt it settle just behind, reminding me that some horrors don't end when the child is found, when the suspect is in cuffs, when the reports are filed. They end only when every last shadow is lit, and no one has yet figured out how to switch every light on. So, I closed the door, walked the hall to my office, and prepared for dawn, knowing that the darkness would drain away, but its echoes would remain, stirring in the silence, waiting for the next call, the next footprint, the next story to unfold. And I would answer. I would drive. I would face the hush again. Because when you're a cop in Texas, the night is never really over. It only changes shape, and you learn to carry it with you, even into the sunrise.